Greetings and welcome to this course overview for ethical hacking capture the flag exercises. I'm Professor K, and I will be your instructor for the entire course. So let's go ahead and get started. The course overview is what we're going to be looking at here, and we're going to talk about what this course offers and who should be taking it and how to get the most from it. We're going to look at how to build that virtual network, which you should already know how to do. If you come to this course, then you should already know how to create a virtual install of Cali Linux, and I shouldn't have to reiterate it. But I know there's going to be some people who want to set the world on fire with their hacking skills, and they're just going to forget all about taking the ethical hacking courses and learning the fundamentals and just jump right into trying to be a pen tester or a hacker. Good luck with that. Setting up the virtual lab environment, we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how to get the most from the course. Alright, so why is Module 01 so important? Because if you can't set up a virtual machine, then you can't complete the course. Alright, so it's very important that you go through Module 01 and create that virtual install of Cali, and that you know how to download the OVA files for each of the CTFs, capture the flag exercises, and install or create a virtual install of that target machine. Now you're going to need to take it slow and steady through the course. If you try to blow through it, all you're going to experience is epic failure. So make sure you watch the videos and read the lab from start to finish. Do not skip through the labs. If you have to put your finger on every word of every sentence as you read, that's what you got to do. But do not skip, right? You can call or post a question if you have any issues, and I'll be glad to help you out. You got one virtual install of Cali, and then you're going to have to download and install the OVA file as a virtual machine for each of the CTFs. Each virtual machine should have a minimum of 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now I say that because you're going to need RAM to run your host operating system. You can't just have 2 gigabytes of RAM and assign it to your virtual machine and expect to have any level of performance. Host machines running Windows 7, 8, or 10 or better are preferred. You're also going to need a CPU and a BIOS capable of hardware virtualization. So if you come to this course with a Hello Kitty laptop, don't expect to be able to create your virtual machine or participate with the hands-on labs. Emulation programs that you can use: Vmware, Virtualbox, Hyper-V, and there are others. I'm going to show you how I use Vmware and Virtualbox. Most of the CTFs in this course, if not all of them, were created with Virtualbox because it was trouble-free. I downloaded Virtualbox as per most of the instructions for each of the CTFs that I found. Now, if you want to use VMware, that's fine, but you may have problems. I suggest Virtualbox, but you can use VMware. You're just going to have to troubleshoot it and figure out why the OVA file may not want to play nice. So Vmware Workstation comes in 2 different flavors. You've got the free version and you've got the pro version. Either one, right? And then you can use either to create your OVA and your install of Cali Linux. Again, I like Virtualbox for this particular course. On most of my courses, I don't use Virtualbox. I use VMware. But I've gotten to the point now where this Virtualbox is actually becoming very well designed. And it was a pretty much trouble-free experience using it to build this course. So, word to the wise, if the virtual install of the OVA file works best with Virtualbox, don't fight it. Just go with it. So what else you need for this course? Well, you need buy-in. You need to come to this course with a realization and an understanding that you're only going to get what you put out. All right, so if you come to the course thinking that you're going to be able to set the world on fire without having the fundamentals, the basic knowledge of what a port is or how services are or how to read an Nmap Scan result, then you're not going to be able to take away as much as you would like. It's going to be a real struggle. So I suggest that if you've not taken an ethical hacking course, that you go find one and sit it first and get the fundamentals before you learn how to capture flags. Greetings and welcome to this short video presentation where we go about creating a virtual install of Cali using VMware. Allow me to give you a caveat for this lab. From time to time, things change with open source. Things change with the third-party vendors who provide us with the Vmware Player or even Workstation. These applications, these procedures get updated quite regularly. I don't always know when those updates occur unless someone tells me. When I find out that the updates have happened, I get in, I rewrite the labs, I rebuild the videos. And this is an instance of where this is happening right now. I am rewriting the lab and I am rewriting the video because I know that things have changed. When we need to download something, we can go into the lab where the links will be provided for you. In this case, we need to download VMware Player. Now, there's one of two versions you can download. You can download the free player or you can download the workstation. The free player is, as it says, it's free. The workstation version costs about $250. Let's go take a look at that. Again, this link is provided in the lab. All you have to do is right-click on it, hit your control key, and it'll take you right out to the same site. So let's take a look at that real quick. The VMware Player is located up here inside of the VMware.com site, and there's also a link here for the Workstation Pro. Now the difference is this: the Workstation Player is free, and it doesn't come with all the bells and whistles of the Workstation Pro, but it's just as good. The Workstation Pro costs $250. It comes with a 14-day free trial. Once that trial expires, those virtual machines are no longer going to work. So, I advise you, if you're not going to buy the Workstation Pro, to use the free player. Now you have two versions. You have the Workstation for Windows, you have the Workstation Player for Linux. There is not a VMware Player per se for a Mac. For Macs, we have to use Virtualbox. Once you have VMware Player installed, you're then ready to begin the download process for your image. I use a tool to download my images because it makes it much quicker. The tool I use is called Free Download Manager. There is a link in the lab also for the Free Download Manager. It allows you to download much quicker, but it also allows you to restart if your download becomes interrupted. Now these downloads are rather big, as you can see. The image for Cali, the 64-bit image, is 2.7 gigs. If you get almost done and your internet drops and you don't have a download manager, you will have to restart from the beginning. So that's why I like using a free download manager, and I'll show you how to do this in just a minute. So the download manager I have is already installed and it's already up and running. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go out and we're going to visit the offensive security site and get our image. So here we go. So I'm out here on offensive security, and we have a number of images we can download. But one of those images is the VMware. We have images for Virtualbox and Hyper-V. Now I'm interested in the 64-bit version, and I can get the torrent or I can get the straight download. We're downloading an OVA file that is just a disk image with all the supporting files that we need to run Cali without having to step through an install procedure. Once the download is complete, all we have to do is just import the image. There's nothing I have to do to install Cali. It's already pre-installed. All I'm doing is importing the image, and when I get done importing the image, I'm given a logon. I log in, I give it the password, and we're good to go. So let's see how this works. So I want the free download manager to handle this. So I'm going to right click on my torrent and I'm going to go to copy the link location. I'm now going to bring up my download manager. This is what it looks like. If I click on the plus sign, you'll notice that that link that I copied went to my clipboard and my download manager picked it up. So if I say OK, it's going to now configure and begin the download. I can go ahead and say download to all this, and now the download begins. You'll notice that the time that it takes to download starts to drop rather quickly, and it should end up with just about 27 minutes or so. That's another advantage of using the download manager. That is the time that it takes to download. My download is complete. I can now go to the download location for my image of Cali for VMware. I'm going to browse to it. When I get to it, I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to select open with either the VMware Player or the Workstation. Either one, both of them use the same wizard. So I'm going to go ahead and select a VMware Workstation. So I click on that, and in just a moment I get this screen right here, or this window asking me what I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and import. It takes just a few minutes and the Cali image will be imported. Now once the machine has completed its importation into the workstation, I can go ahead and click on the option to power on this virtual machine. And in just a moment, Cali is going to boot up. And I can go ahead and click in here and hit enter. Cali quickly boots up to my logon screen, and the username I'm going to use is root. Hit enter, and the password is Tor, root spelt backwards. In just a moment, I'll have a Cali Linux desktop. Cali has completed logging on. Now I want to stop Cali from logging me off after 5 minutes of inactivity. Now to do this, I'm going to go up here to the power button. I'm going to click on the system utilities, and I'm going to scroll down till I come to power. Over here on the right, I'm going to pull down this window, and I'm going to select where it says never. I'm just going to close this out, and that will stop Cali from logging me off after 5 minutes of inactivity. Now, though this is a virtual machine, it is an actual operating system, and it must be treated as if it was a physical machine. So with that being said, you cannot just arbitrarily go up here to the corner and power off the operating system by clicking on the X and selecting to power off. That's not how you shut down the operating system. You have to shut it down gracefully as if it was a physical machine. So we go to the power button, over to the upper right, scroll down here to the next power button, click on that, and you have the option to either power off, restart, or cancel. When you download the Cali image, all you get is the default installation package. You do not get all the packages or the latest and the greatest updates from the Cali repositories. To do that, we have to open a terminal. I'm going to go over here to the quick launch, and this is my terminal. I'm going to click that, and now the terminal opens up. Inside of the prompt here, I'm going to type in app space get space update ampersand space app dash get upgrade dash y, and the dash y just answers the question, do you want to continue? I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Once the update procedure begins, Cali goes out and finds the latest updates from its repositories. Do be patient with these updates. They can take some time. So if you got something else to do, this is a great time to go do it. With the new Cali images, the VMware tools come pre-installed, so there's no need to worry about that. In this short video presentation, we saw how we go about building a Cali image using a OVA file downloaded from Offensive Security's site. Greetings, and in this short video presentation we're going to see how easy it is to create a virtual machine of Cali using a pre-built image. Now the first thing we need to have on our host machine is a hypervisor. Now if you're watching this video, it's because you either can't use VMware because Windows 10 doesn't like it, or you have a Mac operating system. So we go out to the virtualbox.org site, and all these links are in the lab. So you just follow the lab and it'll give you the link to come out here and to get your download package for VirtualBox. Now once you're up here, you have to decide whether or not you're going to install VirtualBox on a Windows or an OS X or a Mac host. Alright, you also have Linux and you have Solaris. Alright, so once we've done that and we've installed VirtualBox, our next step is to install a free download manager. Why? Because this is a big download, and you don't want to waste time being disconnected and having to restart, and not only that, but the time that it takes to download almost 4 gigs of data can be very time consuming. I mean, this can go on for 10, maybe 12 hours just using a normal Explorer download method. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a download manager. This will manage the download for us so that if we get disconnected, we can pick up right where we left off, and it greatly speeds up the download process. So I've downloaded this one here called Free Download Manager. It's spyware, malware, adware free. No worries there. Now once we have that downloaded, we're going to go over to the Cali download site. Now once you have your software installed, you got the Virtualbox hypervisor installed, you have the Free Download Manager installed. Now we can go over to the Cali download site for the Virtualbox images. And so I'm up here at offensive-security.com, and I went to their image download site. And inside the image download site, we have a number of different images we can download. We have VMware images, we have Virtualbox, and we have Hyper-V images. So you've got 3 different hypervisors that you can deal with here. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to select the version that we need for our machine. Most of us are going to be using 64-bit. There may be an occasional 32-bit piece of hardware that shows up, but for the most part, most of us have upgraded our hardware in the last 2 or 3 years, so we're going to have 64-bit hardware. Now, we have to decide whether we want to do it through a straight download or do we want to use a torrent. Now, Free Download Manager will associate with torrent files. That's not a problem, right? So if you click on either one, it's still going to work. But I don't find much difference in the download speed or the download time with either one. So the torrent and the actual straight download work pretty much the same. So what I like to do is just right click on the download that I choose, and I'm just going to go to copy the link location like so, and I'm going to open up my download manager. I'm going to click on this plus sign up here in the left hand corner, and it actually picks it up from my clipboard for me. So now all I have to say is OK, and it goes out, requests the download, and I'm saving my download to a separate partition so that I don't fill up my C drive. Now this is all part of the properties that are available inside of the Free Download Manager. So by default, it wants to save it over to your downloads folder on your C drive, but I went ahead and moved that over to another location. So now I'm going to just click on download, and it will begin the download process very quickly, and it starts to drop the time down rapidly. So right now I'm at 13 minutes. Now again, this is a very large download, and if you do this without the download manager, expect to spend somewhere between 8 and 12 hours waiting for the download to complete. So my download has completed. So now I'm going to browse using my Explorer right here. I'm going to browse over to where this download is currently located. Now this image will automatically associate itself with a Virtualbox. So all I have to do to get this to happen is just double click it like so, and Virtualbox is going to start up and the installation process will begin. So Virtualbox pops up, and now it wants to import this image using the Import Virtual Appliance Wizard. Nothing could be easier. Okay, so all we have to do is just tell it to import it. That's all we have to say. Say import, and the import process begins. So the importation of our Cali image has completed, and there is Cali sitting in our menu waiting to be started. So let's just go ahead and highlight it and then click on the green start button. And Cali is going to start up here in just a moment. And now we have an error. Now this error is very common, so we're going to see how we go about fixing it. If we open up the details, it tells you that because the USB 2.0 controller state is part of the saved VM state, the VM cannot be started. To fix the problem, either install the Oracle Virtualbox extension pack or disable the USB 2.0 support in the VM settings. Easy enough. Close that out. Let's go into the settings. And now we're going to go into the USB. And right here it says Enable USB Controller. Uncheck that. Say OK. Now when we go back and we try to start it, we won't have a problem. So these are just some of the things that you have to worry about sometimes with these images. For the most part, they're very painless and they work without any problems at all. So now it just wants to know which install do you want to use, and we're going to go ahead and accept the default and allow it to boot up to the Cali desktop. So be patient as Cali starts to boot up, because it looks like it may not be doing anything, but it's working. Alright, the username for Cali is root, and I'm going to hit enter. Now the password is root spelt backwards, or Tor. Now before you hit the sign on button, click on this little wheel right here, and now we can change our desktop display. By default, it wants to use the system X11, but this is problematic. So I suggest that before you have problems, you go ahead and head that off at the pass and select the GNOME. Alright? And now we just say sign in. Now what problem am I talking about? Well, there's a problem with the desktop in the Cali rollout version in that it will close you out if you open up a terminal session. So you're sitting here at the desktop, and if you open up a terminal, it automatically logs you off. So to prevent that from happening, we just switch desktops. Now, and our next thing we want to do here is we want to go ahead and set the power option so that Cali doesn't log us off after 5 minutes of inactivity. To do this, we're just going to go over here to the top right, and we're going to pull down this menu here, and we're going to go to the settings button. Click on the settings, and now we're just going to go over to power, and from the power menu we pull down the blank screen option and we select never, and that will keep you from getting logged off. Just close it out, the X right there. Okay, now when you shut down Cali, you have to do it gracefully. You can't just go in here and click on this option right here. This is no good. This will corrupt your Cali install. Luckily it's an image. Luckily you have that image backed up someplace, so it's nothing to blow it out and to reinstall it using that image. But to prevent this from happening, we want to go ahead and make sure that we shut down gracefully. So we do that by clicking on the power button here, and we go to the power option here, and you have one of two options, either power off or restart or cancel. We're going to go ahead and cancel, and now we're going to get into the process of actually updating Cali. So I've gone ahead and made Cali full screen by just going up in here and selecting the option. I'll knock it back down again, and if I go in here and click, I can make it full screen. Now this may not work for you until you have the guest editions installed. Don't panic if it doesn't go full screen. We will get to the installation of the guest editions. Now we want to go ahead and update Cali because there's a lot of stuff out there that we need to get before we can actually assume that Cali is ready for prime time. So if you look at the lab, underneath the section where it talks about updating your Cali install, there is a command there that says app-get space update space ampersand space app-get space upgrade space -y. Yes, welcome to Linux. This is how the command line works. Now I just copied that out of the lab, and I'm going to go back over to my terminal up inside of Cali, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say paste, and there's the command. Now this will stop you from having a lot of headaches and fat fingering the commands and getting frustrated. Just copy and paste the commands from the lab into your Cali and you won't get so frustrated. Okay, so I'm now going to go ahead and just say enter. And now Cali's going to go out, it's going to find the site that it needs so that it can update. And when we come back, we'll have an updated Cali. You have to be patient with Cali and the update process. If you're not, then you're going to corrupt the install of these updates and you're going to have to start all over again. And again, with an image, it's not a big deal. But when we get done updating Cali, we can then take a snapshot of Cali and that will become our image. And that will include all of these updates. Now, throughout the update process, you will be prompted to make some decisions or to interact with some of these updates. This one here is for the Mac changer. So I'm going to go ahead and select yes on this one. And I'm just going to use my arrow and come on over and say yes. And then I'm just going to hit enter. And the update process continues. Okay, so now the next interaction is with configuring another service. And it wants to say that there are services installed on your system which need to be restarted with certain libraries. Okay, that's fine. So we're going to go ahead and use our arrow again. Come on over to say yes, and we'll restart for us without asking. And again, the installation of the updates continues. Our next interaction here is with the configuring of the grub-pc. Just go ahead and hit enter. And now it wants to know about the grub installing devices. Just go down here and just tab on down and say OK. And continue with installing the grub. Just say yes and hit enter. And we'll continue on with the updating of Cali. So Cali has now finished updating, and we can confirm this because we are back at the root at Cali prompt. So we're going to go ahead and close out the terminal. And let's go ahead and do a graceful restart. I'm going to go up here to my start button, click on the next start button, and now I'm going to select restart. And when Cali comes back up, we'll have everything calmed down, and we should be able to proceed with installing the guest editions. Cali has restarted. I've logged back in, and I'm back to my desktop. And again, let's launch the terminal. And this time we're going to install the guest editions. So if you go to the lab, and we are on page 10, you'll see that there's a command there for sudo get app-get install Virtualbox, the guest editions. And we're just going to go ahead and right click in here, and we're going to paste that in, and we're going to say install. As soon as this gets done, we'll be right back. So the guest editions have completed their installation process, and again we are back at the root at Cali prompt, letting us know that that is the case. We're going to close out the terminal, and again we're going to do another graceful restart so that all these guest editions can properly install themselves and settle down. So the next thing we want to do before we get out of here is create a snapshot. Now, the snapshot is an image of a time when we had everything updated, we had installed the guest editions, and we have Cali exactly where we want it. And once we make this snapshot, we can then go back in and we can make any changes. If the changes happen to hose our Cali install, not to worry, we'll just restore to the snapshot. Let's go ahead and begin. We start by going to Machine, and we're just going to click on Take a Snapshot. This pops up here, lets you know about the snapshot wizard, and you can just give it a user-friendly name. I just call mine Cali Updated, and I'm just going to put this back into the description, and I'm going to say OK to that. And now the snapshot will begin to work, and that's all there is to it. We're now going to shut down Cali, and we're going to see how we go about restoring to a snapshot. So go ahead and gracefully shut down your machine. Go over to the power button, and this time just select power off. So I'm back at the VirtualBox Manager, and if you go over here to the right, you'll see that we have a snapshot. And if you click on this, you'll see that we can bring up the current snapshot and the current state. Now if you right click on this here and you say take a snapshot or clone, you can, but you don't need to. So we can right click on this and you can say restore, delete, or show details. Now if you're going to restore Cali, it's going to ask you a question. It's going to ask you if you want to take a snapshot of the current state as well, and you can just uncheck this, and now you can say restore, and this one here will become the current state. So this is going to conclude our short video presentation on how we go about creating a VirtualBox install of Cali using the pre-built image. Greetings and welcome to the short video presentation where we take a walkthrough for a capture the flag exercise entitled Basic Pen Testing. This CTF is rated as Easy Beginner. This exercise contains multiple remote vulnerabilities and multiple privilege escalation vectors. The validation for this walkthrough was done on VirtualBox, which is the recommended platform, though it may also work on VMware. The hardware requirements are one installation of VirtualBox, one virtual install of Cali Linux, and one virtual install of the basic pen testing OVA file, which can be downloaded from the VolN hub on the internet, or you can use the link inside of the lab file. A couple of caveats before we get too far along. When you boot up the VM for the basic pen testing OVA file, it will tell you that it could not find an adapter. You'll have to go in at that point and change the network adapter over to either bridged or NAT. The second thing is, during the installation process where you actually import the OVA, you'll have to pause and go in and uncheck the box for Enable USB Controller. That must be unchecked. As with any pen testing test that we might perform for a client, or in this case, for this particular capture the flag exercise, we want to stay organized. So we're going to begin by creating a folder from which we can conduct all of our business from. And we're going to post this folder to our desktop. So I've right-clicked on my desktop, and I have selected the option to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder Pen Testing. I'm going to go ahead and say Create. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change location up inside of our terminal over to this Pen Testing folder, from which we will run all of our commands and we will save all of our downloads. For my Cali desktop, I've opened up a terminal and I've typed in cd space desktop/pentesting. Now remember, everything inside of a Linux box is case sensitive, so make sure you add those upper and lowercase letters as you need to. And you'll notice that my prompt changes to let me know that I'm now inside of that pen testing folder. So the next thing we want to do is figure out what is the network portion of our IP address for this particular location. So if this was a new client and I wanted to know what the network IP was for this particular location, I would gather that information by using an ifconfig command from my terminal. And we'll see that the network portion of this network is 192.168.0. Now it's important that you understand whose IP address you're working with. You're not working with my IP address. You're going to work with the IP address for your network that is assigned to your installation of Cali so that you can make everything happen as it's supposed to in the lab. Do not get wrapped around the IP addresses that I'm showing you in the video or in the lab. Concern yourself only with the IP addresses associated with your devices. It's always a good thing to keep your terminal clear so that you don't have to struggle looking for the information that you're trying to find. So this next step is part of the footprinting or the enumeration of this network, and we're going to look for what devices are present. To help us discover what devices are currently present on our network, we can use a couple of different devices. Now I like this tool called NetDiscover, and I type that in, give it a space, and I type in -r, which stands for range. Then I follow that up with the range of IP addresses that I want to scan. So I want to scan for the entire subnet of 192.168.0.0, and I type in a /24 to tell it that I want it to concern itself with just that last octet. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And in just a moment it's going to come back and it's going to give me some results. NetDiscover came back and it told me that it found 3 devices sitting on my network. I have a .1, which is obviously is my firewall. Then I have a .29 and I have a .32. I believe that the .32 is my target machine. So we're going to go ahead now and fire up Nmap, and we're going to conduct a scan for what services, ports, and what the operating system is that is running on .32. Now remember, this is my network discovery, not yours, so your IP address of your target will differ. So I've typed in Nmap space, and I want to know what services are running, so I'm going to use the small letter S, capital S, space -AT4, which is going to tell me what the operating system is that is running on .32. So let's go ahead and hit enter. My Nmap scan has completed, and now we can go over the results real quick and see what we got. I show that I have 3 services running on my target. I have an FTP server called Pro FTPD. I also have OpenSSH running, and I also have an Apache server running on Ubuntu. So we know a couple of things here. First off, that this is going to be a Linux target. And if we go down a little bit further, we'll get some OS details. And in here, you can see that I'm running Linux version 3.2 to somewhere between that and 4.9. Alright, so we've got a lot of good information here. So we're going to go ahead and get started with looking at what exploits we can get at with this machine. So it's important that we pay attention to these results back from the Nmap scan, because this is what's going to give us our path and our information that we can use to try to exploit our target. So we see that we have port 21 running an FTP server. Well, what's important here is what version of an FTP server it is running and the version of the software. That's what's going to tell us if there is an exploit available. And the same thing with SSH. So we see that OpenSSH version 7.2 P2 is running on Ubuntu. And we also see that we have an Apache server running, and its version is 2.4.18. This is all good information because we're going to use this hopefully to figure out how to exploit this target. I like to rate my exploits or my potential for exploits in order. So I always go after the low-hanging fruit first. In this case, I want to do a Nikto scan of the target. I want to find out more information about what files, folders, and services are actually running on this particular web server. So I'm going to use Nikto, and I've typed in space -host followed by the IP of the host that I want to scan. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Give it a moment. It'll come back with some good results. Our Nikto scan has completed, and now we can go over the information real quick. We see that there's a lot of good information here. We've got some server leaks on some of the inodes via the e-tags. This is often a vulnerability within itself. But if we scroll down here a little bit, we find that there's a folder, and it's called this secret folder right here. This might be interesting, it tells us. So we're going to remember this. We're going to come back to this in just a moment. And now we're going to move on with looking for any hidden directories or files up on this web server using dirb. So now that we know that the secret directory up on the web server is of interest to us, we're going to go ahead and use dirb, which is a web content scanner. And it's going to look for any more hidden or present web objects up there on that server for us. So I've typed in dirb space the IP address of the web server. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and now it's going to conduct that scan. So after just 2 quick scans, one using Nikto and the other one using dirb, we were able to discover that there was a secret directory up on the web server, and we were told that it might be of interest. So we used Derb to drill down and get some more information. And we found out some good stuff here, such as, number one, this is a WordPress site. And we now have the location for the WordPress admin login page. We can also see the WordPress content, and we can see some other things all related to this being a WordPress site. So using my Cali browser, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to access this web page that's running on this WordPress site. Now, it says it works, and that's great, but I don't believe that's the actual web page we want. So I'm going to do a forward select. I'm going to type in secret, and let's see what happens here. And then we get the secret page, and there's a couple of items on here. One says skip to content, and this is my secret blog, and it says it's just another WordPress site. Let's see what's over here. We have the login page. Well, I happen to know a little bit of something about the default login for a WordPress site. We can go ahead and try to log in and see if we can just use admin and admin. Now, this is out of the box. So when you install or you create a WordPress site for the first time, the default username and password is admin. A lot of people, especially web developers and the such, are too lazy, or they just don't know that they need to change the default username and password for their WordPress site. So what we're looking at here is actually washed out. It's not really the WordPress site. We don't see a theme. We don't see anything. So we know that we're going to have to use a trick, which is add the domain name to the path for this particular web server. Going back over to our Nmap Scan, we find that there is a domain name assigned to this particular web server, and it is VTCSec. Alright, so we've got some good information here. So let's go ahead and add to our host file the path over to the secret website using its domain name. Let's see how we do that. I'm going to add an entry to my host file for resolving the IP address of 192.168.0.32 to the domain name of VTCSec. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Now that command prompt came back letting me know that the command completed successfully. So now we're going to bring back up our browser, and we're just going to refresh the secret page. And we see now that we have the theme for the WordPress site. And this is what you should be seeing if you log on to an actual WordPress site. You shouldn't be seeing that washed out white background with the text. And if you see that, then you know that you're not resolving it the correct way using the domain name. So again, let's go after some of that low-hanging fruit, and let's just scroll on down inside of here and see what we have. We have the login page. So I want this login page because I want to just test to see if my hunch is right. So I'm going to go ahead and type in admin, and then I'm going to tab on down, and I'm going to type in admin, and I'm going to hit enter. And lo and behold, we get access to the dashboard. As administrator for this WordPress site, we have the complete run of this web server now. Though we were able to guess the login for the WordPress site using admin and admin as the username and password, there is an easier way for us to not have to guess and perform a scan. Now we can use the WP Scan utility to enumerate and find out what the username is for the WordPress site, and then we can carry on and do a dictionary attack and find the password. So let's go ahead and see how we do that. I've typed in WP Scan space -U, which stands for the URL. I've typed in the URL, and then we've given it a space -- enumerate and a space -U. U stands for users. So I want to enumerate the users using this particular scan. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. In just a moment we'll come back and it'll give us some good. My scan has completed, and it lets me know that the default first WordPress username admin is still used. Now let's go ahead and see if we can figure out the default password. For this scan, we're going to again use the WP scanner, and I've typed in the same information as before. On this time, I told it that I want to use a word list, and this is where the word list is located, and I want at least 2 threads ran on this particular scan. Now, what I'm going to do here is go ahead and hit enter. In just a moment, it's going to come back and it's going to find me the password that goes along with that admin username. And down here at the bottom, you can see it doing a brute force attack against the username admin. So our WP scan has completed for the brute force attack against the target, and we see that we come back with some information here about the default username of admin and the password being admin. So you see how we used this utility to perform that brute force attack, not only to give us the username, but also to give us the password for that user. This is going to conclude part 1 of this walkthrough for basic pen testing. In part 2, we're going to get more involved with the vulnerability analysis, and then we'll get into the exploitation. I'll see you in part 2. Greetings and welcome to part 2 of our basic pen testing walkthrough. So we're going to get busy now with a vulnerability analysis, and once we're done with that, we'll get into the actual attacking or the exploitation of our target. In our last video, you saw how easy it was to get root access to that WordPress site as administrator, allowing us to upload, download, do whatever we wanted to with that WordPress site. We're going to continue on now and look for some more exploitations that we can use here. And we're going to start off with that FTP server that we found with our Nmap Scan. So one tool that we can use to help us find that exploit that'll take us to the next level is called Searchsploit. So I've typed in Searchsploit space the name of the utility. In this case, it's the Pro FTPD server running software version 1.3.3.c. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and see what it comes up with here. And it came up with a couple of exploits that we can run using our Metasploitable installation. So let's go ahead and see how this is going to work. Searchsploit has come back with a couple of backdoor exploits that we can run, and we're going to come back to this later. Right now, we're also going to search for something that might be useful against OpenSSH, and we're going to search for that in just a moment. So we found a couple of exploits up there for the Pro FTPD server, and now we're going to move on and we're going to look to see if there's anything available for the OpenSSH version 7.2 P2. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it comes back, and there are a couple of exploits that we can run. Now, since we're most likely to get a shell for the root access for this particular target using the exploit for FTP and or HTTP, we're going to go ahead and again we're going to start with that low-hanging fruit, and we're going to start off with trying to exploit our server with the FTP exploit. We can go ahead and clear our screen here, and now we're going to launch the MSF console, and we're going to search for that exploit that we can use against the Pro FTPD server. So Metasploit is opened up for us, and now we're going to type in search Pro FTPD space the version number we're looking for, and that is 1.3.3c, and we'll see if Metasploit can hand us off something here. So our search results have came back, and we found exactly what we're looking for here, which is the exploit /Unix/FTP/ProFTPD_133C backdoor. This is rated as excellent, and that's what we want. So what we're going to do now is we're going to highlight that, and we're going to copy it like that. And then we're going to use the use command to pull this up. I'm just going to right click and paste, and now you'll see that my prompt changes to let me know that we are now using that exploit. To find out what options you have to configure, you can use the show options command. So I'm going to type in show options, And you'll see that we have to set the remote host IP address. So it says our host is required, yes, and that is the target IP address. That's all we have to set here. So I'm going to type in set and along with the IP address of the target. And now we're ready to go ahead and configure that one option. And it comes back and let me know that the rhost option has been configured. We're now ready to launch this exploit, and to do that I'm going to use the exploit command. In just a moment it should come back letting me know that we have a backdoor. Now we won't be able to see the prompt, and that is why you see this blinking cursor down here. So we're going to have to elevate ourselves just a little bit, and we're going to see how we do that. So it says the command shell session 1 opened up on between 192.168.0.30, which is my Cali machine, and the target. So we have this command prompt down here, but we can't do much with it. So let's just go ahead and use a little bit of Python code to help elevate ourselves just a little bit more. So with the use of a little bit of Python code, we can tell the server to give us a bash shell. So I've had to copy off my Python code into a text file so that I can get to the actual characters that I need to run this. Now you see that there's a difference between what I'm typing in here. There we go. So if you have a problem with that Python code, you're going to have to first copy and paste it into a text file and then ensure that it is properly configured correctly, and then input it into the prompt, and that'll work. It doesn't take it very well from the lab file. So now we have root access over to the server that was our target. So we've accomplished our mission here. So we can type in a couple of different things. We can type in, for instance, who am I? And it says that we are root. And that's all we need to know. Alright, so that's going to conclude part 2 of this video on how we go about performing a walkthrough. That's going to conclude part 2 of our walkthrough for the basic pen testing vulnerability exercise. Now if you have any questions or concerns about any of the material or any of the content that was covered in this video or the lab, please do not hesitate to reach out and contact your instructor, and I'll see you in my next video. Greetings, and in this short video presentation we're going to do a video walkthrough for the capture the flag exercise known as Pentesting. The goal of this capture the flag is to find 4 different flags and gain root access. There are multiple vectors that can be used, but not all of them are going to be shown for this particular walkthrough. I have researched this particular capture the flag, and I think I have found what I consider to be the best vectors. Hardware requirements consist of 1 virtual install on Virtualbox or Vmware Player or Workstation Pro, 1 install of Cali Linux, and 1 virtual install of the Pentesting OVA file, which can be loaded from the lab, or you can go to VulnHub and download it from there. As with any pen test, organization is very important, so we're going to start off by creating our organizational folder up on the desktop here. We're going to call it Pentesting. Once we've got that organizational folder created, we're going to take our terminal and we're going to change location, and we're going to work inside of this organizational container to make sure that everything we do is saved to this one location. First thing I want to do is get that information about my network IP address, so I'm going to go ahead and do an ifconfig on my Cali machine, and we see that I'm running on network 192.168.0. My IP address for my Cali machine is .30. We're going to go ahead and clear the terminal, and now we're going to do a net discover. At my terminal prompt, I've typed in nets discover space -r. -r is just the switch that net discover uses to indicate the range. In this case, the range is going to be 192.168.0.0, and we're going to back that off just a little bit, give it a // and then a 24. So I'm telling it I want you to scan that last octet, and I want you to give me all the IP addresses that are available on this network. Go ahead and hit enter, and in just a moment it's going to come back and give me some results. The target IP address for this particular capture the flag machine is going to be .27. So we're going to go ahead and make a note of that. We're now ready to enumerate our target and find out what ports and services are running, and we want to get some information about the operating system as well. So I'm going to do my Nmap Scan. I've typed in Nmap space dash small letter S, capital S, give it a space, dash AT4 space, the IP address of the target. Go ahead and hit enter. And in just a moment it's going to come back and give me some good results. The Nmap Scan has completed, and it comes back and it gives me 3 different ports running 3 different services that I could use as vectors for this particular pen test. The first one is port 21 running FTP, and it's running the very secure FTPD server using version 3.0.2. We also have SSH using OpenSSH version 6.6 1P1. We're also running this on Ubuntu, and we got some information about the kernel down here that we might be able to use if we need to. We're ready to move on to the vulnerability analysis, and to do this I'm going to start off by using Searchsploit to see if I can find any well-known exploits that might be available for one of these 3 vectors that I have discovered with my Nmap Scan. So we're going to start off by looking for something that might be available for the very secure FTPD service 3.0.2, and it comes back and it says there's nothing there. Moving on over to the SSH, we're going to go ahead and try to log on as root and see what pops up here. And it says this requires the use of a key. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And it says permission denied. I need a public key. So we're not going to get on there anytime soon. Time to take a look at HTTP and see if we got anything cooking over there. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up a browser and take a visit to the Apache web server, and we're going to bring up that index page and see if there's anything there that can be of use. Visiting the web server just pulls up a page with an image on it. There's no links. There's nothing of real use. So we're going to try to go ahead and see if we can view the source here, view the page source, and see what this brings up. Now, oftentimes we can find little bits of information in here left over by the developer, maybe a bit of information about a password or a username or something. We're going to go ahead and scroll through the whole text, and we find a key. So we got our first key right here. You just have to scroll down and look for it. So make sure that when you're viewing this source that you look at everything. We can now move on over to the robust.txt file. Oftentimes we'll get some good stuff in here, and we can also look at the page source in here if you like. See if there's anything, but there's nothing in here. Remember to enumerate everything. Now we're going to take a look at this temporary page, and then we'll take a look at the PHP. Well, the temporary page just tells us to try harder. So we're going to take a look at that PHP, see what this got off. Access to the PHP is forbidden. We'll come back to that later on. We can now do a scan for some hidden files and other web content up on the HTTP server, and we're going to use derb for this little ditty. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. So what we found out using the derp scan was that this is actually a WordPress site, and we have an admin login, and that the weblog directory is where this WordPress site is being contained. So we're going to take a trip on up to the weblog and see if we can find out anything interesting. A couple things happen when we try to visit the weblog page. First off, it will try to redirect you to a domain, but you're not going to be able to find it unless you modify your host file. So we're going to minimize this. Now what happens is the IP address needs to resolve to the host name. So to do this, you've got to go up inside of your terminal and you've got to modify your host file to include the domain name along with the IP address. With the inclusion of the domain name in our host file, we are able to resolve the IP address correctly. and we get this default web page. Not a lot going on in here. You can go ahead and view the source. Won't tell you anything, but it's always a good idea to check and make sure that there's nothing hidden in here that can give us a password or a user account or something that might be useful. So we can move on to doing a WordPress scan, and we typed all the information in here we need. The -u means the URL, which we've typed in, to include the page that we want to, or the directory we want to enumerate, in this case weblog, and we want to look at the users. We're looking for users up inside of this particular website, and we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and the scan begins. Here again you see where the website is being redirected, and if we don't have that domain name up inside of our host file, then it's not going to resolve correctly. So the WordPress scan has completed, and we've found a couple of interesting things here. One, we got a vulnerable plugin, and we're going to run that up inside of Searchsploit in just a second. And if we scroll down, we were able to enumerate a couple of usernames, and one of them was Uncle Stinky and the other one was admin. So this is the admin for the WordPress site, and Uncle Stinky is also a user. The other thing we note here is that the default for the WordPress site is set to admin, and the password is set to admin. So we know about the slideshow gallery plugin being vulnerable, so we're hoping that Searchsploit will hand us over some exploits that we can use to go ahead and further use that as a vector to gain root access. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter. So it comes back and it gives us a list of all the exploits that are available. Now for this particular vector we're going to be using Metasploit. So at my prompt I've typed in MSF console. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Now when this starts up, we're then going to do another search for the slideshow gallery, and we'll see if we come up with an exploit up inside of it, the MSF console. Metasploit has opened up, and I'm now ready to conduct that search for the exploit that can align with the slideshow gallery. So I'm going to do a search, and in just a moment we'll see if we get any good results. We found the exploit that we want to use, and we see that its ranking is excellent, and it tells us exactly what this is going to be used for. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and copy this like so, and then I'm going to bring up my prompt. What I'm going to do now is just type in clear, and we're going to type in the use command, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste the name of that exploit, and I'm going to hit enter. You'll notice that my prompt changes to let me know that the command completed successfully. Now the next thing we got to do is set some options. So let's go ahead and just do a show options to see what we have to set here. So we've got to set the remote host. We've got to set the remote port, but that's already been done for us. We got to set the target URI, and we have to have a WordPress password and a WordPress user for this particular exploit. So let's go ahead and get busy with that. So I'm going to type in set our host. So I've typed in the IP address for the remote host. I'm going to hit enter. That's been set. Now we're going to move on to setting the target URI. This is the directory where the WordPress site resides. Type that in. I'm going to hit enter. Using the information that we gathered from our WordPress scan, we know that the user is admin and that the password for this user is also admin. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. So the last thing I have to type in is that password using the set command this time. And that took as well. Now we're ready to run the exploit. I'm going to hit enter. Now I could have logged on to the WordPress site as admin, uploaded a PHP script, and then started a listener using Netcat, and I could have established a shell. But anytime you can establish a metapreter prompt, that's always going to be better than a limited shell, because now we can go ahead and escalate this up to a bash, and then hopefully we can get root access this way. So I've typed in sysinfo. I've got some information about the computer's name, the OS version, and some other information. Now I'm ready to go ahead and get up inside of that weblog directory. To do this, I'm going to change location using the cd command. I'm going to move on over to the var, the www folder. up inside the HTML folder, and finally into the weblog directory. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. To show that I am inside of the weblog directory, I'm going to go ahead and type in an ls command and list the contents, and you can see everything that we have in here. One of the things you can count on is that there will be a wp.config.php file up inside of your WordPress site. This is going to contain the information for the users and the name of the database and that user password that has access to that particular database. So we want to go ahead and look inside and read the contents of this particular file. Using the cat command, we're going to go ahead and view the contents of this particular file right here from the terminal. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And if we scroll down a little bit, or scroll up in this case, we get some information about the name of the database. We also find out that the default user account for this particular database is root. And we also have the database password, which is Mysql. We're still enumerating, so we're going to go back up inside of the home directory, and we're going to take a look at what might be present there. So I'm going to type in cd/home and hit enter. That lets me know that we are now inside of the home directory. I'll do an ls, list of contents, and we see that we have two directories in here. One is named mrderp and the other one is stinky. If we try to access either of those directories, we're going to get an access is denied. Time to go around the other direction, so we're going to try to log on to the PHP MyAdmin site and see if we can get some access and find out some information about the default users and their user passwords. Use that information that we found using that wp-config.php file. We know that the username was root and the password was Mysql. We're going to go ahead and attempt to log on here, and we have. And if we open up the WordPress site over here on the left and we scroll on down, we want to look at the users. And we see that there's two users in here. There's Uncle Stinky and there's admin. And their user passwords have been hashed quite well. So this is going to be a little bit more difficult, but it can be done. We're now going to use John the Ripper to go ahead and crack these two hashes. What we're going to use is a text file that we're going to put these in, and then we're going to give a word list to John the Ripper that it's going to use and try to figure out the passwords for these two user accounts. Let's see how that gets done. So back to the desktop, we're just going to open up a text editor. We can use the one that's inside of the application quick launch. And we're going to copy in those two hashes. When that's done, we're going to save it as a hash.txt file, and then we're going to place it inside of our working directory. Here's my hash.txt file, and if we open it up, you'll see that we have two hashes inside of there. They're both listed, and again, the name of the file is hash.txt. Now the next thing you're going to have to do is probably travel on over to where the word lists are actually kept. And to do this, you're going to open up your File Explorer. You're going to go to Other Locations, click on Computer. You're going to go to USSR, or USR, go to Share, and you scroll on down to Word List. You'll open up the Word List directory. Inside here, you're going to find this particular archive. You're going to right-click on it, and you're going to go ahead and extract it here. If that doesn't work, just double-click it, open it up, and then say Extract, and then let it extract here. And you just click on Extract, and you're all done. So the next thing we want to do is open up a new terminal. To do that, we're just going to right-click on the terminal icon, go to New Window, and then we're going to change directory over to our working folder. From the prompt up inside of my working folder where I have the hash.txt file sitting and waiting, I'm going to type in John space hash.txt. Then I'm going to type in the following command, -- word list equals the path to the word list and the name of that word list, and then I'm going to hit enter. And since I've already used John the Ripper to crack those two hashes, it keeps that information stored up inside of its configuration, so I won't be able to run that particular crack again. Now you're going to be able to see this in action when you run it for the first time, and you have to be patient because it's going to take a while. Alright, well that's going to conclude part 1 of the derp and stink walkthrough, and when I return we're going to continue on where we left off right here, and I'll see you in part 2 of this video series. Greetings and welcome to part 2 of our walkthrough for the capture the flag exercise known as derp and stink. And when we left off, we were working with the John the Ripper utility to crack a couple of hash passwords, and we should have those by now. And the passwords, of course, were for the admin account, admin, and then for Stinky, or Uncle Stinky, it was Wedgie57. So we now have a good username and password to get us up inside of the WordPress site for the user Stinky. Now, to do this, we have to get over to the WordPress admin login page. So what I've done here is I've gone over to this derpandstink.local/weblog/wp-admin. That is the login for the WordPress administration site. Alright, so we're already there. I've typed in Uncle Stinky and the password Wedgie57. So let's go ahead and attempt to log in. And we have logged in. Now, we have control of this particular WordPress site, but we've already exported it, so we don't have to do much up here. But if we scroll down a little bit and look inside of the drafts, we get our next key. So we're done with the WordPress site. We can close that out. We're going to return over here to our Metapreter prompt. So we know now that we cannot access either of the mrderp or the stinky directories. So what we're going to do is we're going to elevate this Metapreter prompt, and we're going to start the process by typing in shell, and that's going to change our prompt over just a little bit. And then we're going to elevate this over to a bash prompt by using that little bit of Python code that we've used in the past. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste that on in there like so. I'm going to hit enter, and you'll notice that we now have a bash prompt. Now I'm still logged on as the www-data user. It's very limited, but I'm now going to change users over to Stinky because we have Stinky's password, so now I can log on. Using the su command, I'm going to change on over to the user Stinky. It wants Stinky's password, which we know to be Wedgie57. Now you'll notice that my prompt changes to let me know that I'm now logged on as Stinky. We now have to get busy and start enumerating everything inside of this user's profile. To do this, we're first going to list the contents, and you'll see that we have two directories, mrderp and Stinky. So we're going to start off with Stinky, and I'm going to do a cd over to the Stinky directory. Now from here, we're going to do another ls, and you'll notice we have a number of directories in here, starting with desktop, documents, downloads, and FTP. Working from left to right, we're going to enumerate all of these directories, and to do this, we're going to start off with the desktop. So I'm going to type in cd desktop, and now I'm going to do an ls, and we have a flag. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to see the contents of our flag here by doing a cat command, and we're just going to do it flag.text, just like that. And there's your hash for our third flag. I need to roll back one level, and now I'm going to go into the documents. So I'm going to type in cd space document, and again I will list the content. And in here we have a derpissues.pcap file, which must be opened up with a Wireshark utility. So we're going to remember this, that this is located up inside of the documents, and if we need to, we'll come back and we'll get it. Let's roll back one level, and now we're going to go into the downloads directory, and it is empty. So let's take a look at that FTP directory and see what's in there. So we're going to do a cd space roll back one level, and let's get into the FTP directory, and let's list the contents. And we have files, so let's do a cd, let's go into files. Now let's list the contents, and we have networking logs, ssh, test.txt, and the temp directory. Again, working from left to right, we need to enumerate everything that's inside of this user's profile. So let's get busy and start off with the network-logs directory. And I'm now going to do a ls, and we have a derpissues.txt. So let's go ahead and cat that out. and we had a message here. And if we read this, we can get some information about the PCAP file being of interest to us, because if we get inside of it, we're probably going to be able to find mrderp's password, and that's going to allow us to use his account. Alright, so let's roll back one more time, and let's get into the SSH folder. And we're going to start looking at the contents. And what we have here are 7 SSH folders. So we're just going to start going through them until we get to the last one. And the last one will present us with a key.txt. So I got to the last SSH folder, and inside of this folder there is a key.txt. We're going to go ahead and cat this out. And this is Stinky's private key for his SSH login. So we're going to go ahead and manipulate this so that we can get access to the server using SSH, using Stinky's account. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy everything all the way down. We're going to right click, we're going to copy. We're now going to open up a terminal by right clicking and going to new window. Move this on over just a little bit. Again, we're going to change directories on over to our working folder. Once we're up inside of our working folder, we're going to create a new text file. And I'm just going to go ahead and use Nano as my text editor and type in Nano, and I'm going to type in stinky.key, just like that. I've now got a clean text file, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste the contents of that key into here. I'm now going to do a Control X, and I'm going to type in Y for yes, and I'm going to hit enter. And if we do an LS and show the contents of our working directory, you'll see that we now have a stinky.key. The next thing we have to do is change the permissions on the stinky.key file. So I've typed in chmod or chmod space 400 space the name of the file that I want to change these permissions on, which is stinky.key. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. It comes back letting me know that the command completed successfully. We're now ready to move on with attempting to log on to the server using SSH using Stinky's private key that we copied over to our working folder. So I've typed in SSH space dash small letter I, and I'm telling it to use the stinky.key file to authenticate the user Stinky at 192.168.0.26, which is the IP address for the target. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it tells me that, let's see, are you sure you want to continue connecting? I'll say yes, and we are in. And we are now able to use a more stable logon, which is the SSH, to continue on with trying to exploit this target. So even though we are logged on to the server using SSH, we don't know what the level of permission Stinky has. To find this out, we're going to use the su command space dash small letter L. And let's see what's going on with his permissions. And his password, and let's see what he has. Authentication failure. That means that he's not authorized to do a whole lot. So Stinky is not authorized to use the su command is what it's telling us. So we're going to have to figure out how we can escalate and improve his permissions, or at least improve our access. Our next move is to copy over the PCAP file to our host machine. To do this, I'm going to copy and paste the following command in, scp space dash I, stinky.key, stinky at 192.168.0.26. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hit enter and see what happens. And the file was copied over to my temp directory. So now I got to go up and get it. So I'm going to go up in here inside of my other locations, computer, there's my temp folder, and there's my derp issues. Now I'm going to right click on this. I'm just going to move this on over to my working directory, and we'll just say select, and it's moved. Now I can go ahead and open this up, and you'll see that I have the derpissues.pcap file in here. Now once we have this PCAP file copied over correctly, we're going to right click on it, and we're going to say open with Wireshark. Once you have the PCAP file opened up inside of Wireshark, you're going to scroll on down to come to entry 5598. You're going to highlight that, you're going to right click, and then you're going to select follow TCP stream. And in here you will be able to find the password for mrderp. And there it is right there. So there's the password for mrderp, and now we're going to log on as mrderp, and we're going to see what permissions he has. We can go ahead and close out the Wireshark. We don't need that anymore. So now that we have mrderp's password, we can log on as mrderp. So let's go ahead and try that. So I'm going to go over here to my SSH, and I'm going to type in su mrderp and watch the password. I'm going to type that big long password in there. Alright, now I'm logged on as mrderp. Alright, so let's do a cd back to his root folder. And now we need to find out exactly what permissions he has. To do this, we're going to type in sudo space dash small letter L. And again, it wants that password for mrderp. Again, I'm going to right click and paste it on in there. And we get this information here that our user can run any command that is contained within the directory /home /mrderp /binaries and starts with the string derby. So if we run a sudo command anywhere inside of this binaries folder with a file that has the name derby, then we will be able to execute whatever root commands we want to execute. So this binaries folder has to be up inside of the mrderp directory, up inside of his home folder. So we're going to go there. We're going to do a cd space /home /mrderp, hit enter, and we're already there. So now we're going to make a directory called binaries. So I'm going to go ahead and right click in here and paste that. So now we're going to make that directory called binary that's going to be up here inside of this home directory, inside of the subfolder mrderp. Go ahead and hit enter. The file already exists. Well, it does exist because I've already done this walkthrough about 4 times. So that's already a given. Alright, so I've already got the directory up there for the binaries. Now we have to do this sh file, this script, and it's called derby.sh. Alright. And then we're going to change the permissions on over so that we could run this, and we did it. Alright. So I'm now going to go in and I'm going to type in sudo space period /binaries /derpy.sh, hit enter, and you saw my prompt change over to the root. Now I'm going to do another cd /root, and we're now inside of that folder. And if I do an ls to show the contents, we have desktops, documents, and downloads. And again, we still have to enumerate. We're not done there yet. Alright, so now let's do an ls, look at the permissions here, and let's do a small letter L and get the permissions for these 3 different directories. Alright, so now we're going to change directory on over to the desktop, and we're going to do an ls, and now we have our final flag. Alright, so I can go ahead and cat this out, and there's the congratulatory message, and of course we get that hash for the flag. Of all the capture the flag exercises I've done recently, this one here was probably the most interesting. It had a lot of twists and turns in it, and I learned a few things, so that was good. And that concludes this short video presentation on capture the flag and the walkthrough we did for derp and stink. If you have any questions or concerns about the information or the content of this exercise, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact your instructor, and I'll see you in my next video. Greetings and welcome to the short video presentation on part 1 of Capture the Flag walkthrough for Stapler. This CTF is rated as beginner to intermediate, and this OVA file for the Stapler CTF is available from the Vuln Hub download site. Though the OVA file is designed to work with either VMware or Virtualbox, I found that it works best with just Virtualbox. To ensure that you have network connectivity between your Cali machine and your target, I recommend setting the network adapters to bridge. For the sake of organization, I also recommend that you create a directory on your desktop and name it Stapler. I also recommend that you run all your commands inside of the directory Stapler and save all your downloads to the same location. As with every capture the flag or pen test, we begin by network enumeration. There's nothing wrong with discovering your network IP using the ifconfig command from your Cali machine. This makes the enumeration process all that much easier. We begin the enumeration process by using the net discover utility --r with our network IP /24. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And in just a moment it will come up and it will show us all the discovered devices on this network. My target IP is going to be 192.168.0.29. Now this is my target IP, of course yours will differ. Now that we have discovered the IP address of our target, we now can enumerate the device for any open ports or services using Nmap. So you see that I've typed in Nmap space and I've typed in a bunch of switches. All this is available up inside of the lab. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and in just a moment my scan results will come back. Our scan results are complete, and we uncovered quite a few valuable and possibly vulnerable ports that might be open, including FTP, NetBIOS with some SMB shares, Mysql, and port 12380 running a Apache web server. We see that FTP running on port 21 is configured for anonymous logon. That's going to be our low-hanging fruit, so we're going to go after that first. So from my terminal, I've gone ahead and accessed my target using FTP, and I have logged on using the name anonymous and the password anonymous, and I have been successfully logged on. So we can go ahead and do an ls to list whatever might be available here at this level. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we see we have one file called note. We're going to go ahead and copy note over to our Stapler directory and take a look at that later. So I've gone ahead and typed in the syntax get note. Now since we are working inside of the Stapler directory, everything that we save from our terminal will go directly to that Stapler directory. Again, that's one of the benefits of good organization. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it says that the transfer was complete. At the FTP prompt, we can go ahead and type in exit. That brings us back to our Stapler prompt, and now we can do a cat to see the contents of that note. So I've typed in cat space note, and it says, Ellie, make sure you update the payload information. Leave it in your FTP account once you are done. Signed, John. So what we got here is a couple of usernames. Not much else can be useful, but we do have a couple of usernames. Our next enumerating attempt will be for the SSH. So I've typed in SSH, and I'm going to try to log on as root. So I've typed in root at my IP address, and we're going to go ahead and hit enter and see what happens here. And it says the authenticity of the host, my IP address, can't be established. Are you sure you want to continue connecting? Yes or no? I'll type in yes, hit enter, and warning, permanently added the IP address to the list of known hosts. Now we've got another message, and we have another user. Barry, don't forget to put a message here. And now it wants my password, which I don't know what it is. So we're just going to go ahead and type in password, see what happens, and connection was closed. Okay, so not much going on here either, but we did get another username. So during our Nmap scan, we learned about some SMB shares, and now we're going to try to access those using the Smb Client. So I've typed in Smb Client space -L, my IP address, and now I'm going to hit enter, and let's see what pops up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in root, and we get some shares. Interesting. Let's see what we got here. We have two active shares. One is Kathy, and the other one is the temp directory. And we have a message. We have a comment that says, Fred, what are you doing here? Which leads me to believe that Fred has access to Kathy's share. So we can attempt to connect to Kathy's share using the user Fred. We'll see how that works. So again, I've typed in the Smb Client syntax, space, whack / Fred, which is the user, / Kathy, which is the share, and then I'm saying the dash capital I, and I want to connect over to 192.168.0.29 space dash capital N. Let's go ahead and hit enter and see what happens here. So I'm in, and let's take a look at what's inside here by doing an ls. So inside of Kathy's directory we have two more subdirectories. One is Kathy_stuff and the other one is the backup directory. Let's go ahead and enumerate Kathy's stuff by changing directory on over to that particular folder. So at that SMB prompt I've typed in cd change directory space Kathy_stuff. Go ahead and hit enter. And we're now in there, so let's go ahead and do an ls and list the contents. Let's see what we have here. Kathy's_stuff directory shows that we have a text file called to-do-list. So we're going to go ahead and get that and copy it on over to our stapler directory, and then we're going to take a look at the contents. So at the SMB prompt I've typed in get space the file we want to capture, which is the to-do-list.txt. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it lets me know that that file was successfully copied over to our stapler directory. We need to do the same with the backup directory, so we're going to change directory on over to there. We'll type in cd backup. So I'm now inside of the backup directory up inside of Kathy's _stuff folder, and we see that we have two files that we can actually get a hold of and copy over to our stapler directory. So let's use the get command, and let's get both of these files and save them over to our stapler folder. Once I've copied those two files over to my stapler location, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, and this time I'm going to go into the temp folder. So I'm going to do an ls, and we see that we have a ls file that is listed inside of the temp folder. So we're going to go ahead and copy that on over. So I'm now ready to go ahead and copy over the ls file, and I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and that file has been copied over to my stapler directory. We're done with the SMB share, so I can type in exit, hit enter. That brings me back to my prompt, put me back inside of the stapler folder. So now what I'm going to do is cat out a couple of those files and see what the contents are. We're going to begin with the to-do list. So I'm going to do a cat and get back over to the end, and I'll hit enter. And it says I'm making sure to back up anything important for Initech Kathy. We can go ahead and see what's inside of that ls file. So I've typed in cat space ls, and let's see what we got in here. But aside from the files and a couple of names, the information that remains proves to be rather useless, so let's move on. We're now ready to start taking a look at that Apache web server running up on port 12380. So let's go ahead and open up our browser, and let's take a look at what's going on over there. So I typed in the IP address of my target, and I've done a colon, and I've typed in the port that is running HTTP. Let's go ahead and see what's going on over here. I'm going to go ahead and just hit enter, and we bring up a web page. Alright, so we've got another user here by the name of Tim, but when we check out the page, there's not much else going on. And even if we look at the source, let's take a look at the source real quick. There might be something in here. But again, we don't have much information, and it's proving to be rather useless. So time to move on. Time to fire up Nikto. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my screen, and let's get ready to scan using Nikto for any misconfigurations that might be present. So at my terminal prompt, I've typed in Nikto space dash small letter h, my IP address, colon, and the port number that HTTP is running on. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and in just a moment we'll get some good scan results. A worthwhile scan, as we were rewarded with 4 directories. We have the PHP myadmin page, we also have the blog page, and we have the admin 112233 page. And we also have a robots.txt file. So any attempt at accessing the directory brings up the home page And that's only until we figure out that we've got to use HTTPS to access these locations. So let's see if these pages have anything to offer, and we're going to begin by opening up our browser again. And we're going to start off with the robots text file. So you see I've typed in https:// the IP address of my target, along with the port number that is running HTTPS or HTTP / the file that I want to access, or in this case the page. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it says that your connection is not secure. That's fine. Click on the advanced button, scroll on down, add the exception, scroll on down a little bit more. Let's see if I can get over here to this thing. Here we go. And confirm the security exception. And there we are. Alright, so we're rewarded with a couple of different items up inside of this text file, and that is the admin 112233 and a blog. Let's see what this is about. The admin 112233 page looks promising, so we're going to go ahead and see what's happening on over there. And we're just going to go up here and get rid of this, delete that, and now we're going to copy and paste that new page we want to get access to. And we've almost been hooked. It looks like we get a warning that we need to make sure that we have Java disabled. Okay to that. Alright, thank you for that warning. So if someone had beef running a cross-site scripting exploit and they had used this page, when we clicked OK or we got into this page, we would have been hooked, and everything we were doing would have been sent back over to that beef, and they would be able to follow along with what we're doing here. But that's not the case. It's just a warning. Alright, so let's go ahead and back this off a little bit. And now we're going to go to the blog site. Okay, let's take a look at that real quick. So this is going to be blog. Let's see what's going on over here. So over here on the blog page, we get a few more usernames, and there is a login here, and if we click that, you're going to find out that we have been presented with the administration page for the WordPress site. Interesting. So we're going to go ahead and run a WP scan and see what we can gather from this. So we're going to do this WordPress scan, hoping to enumerate some users, some plugins, or some other vulnerabilities that might be present. So I've gone typing this command. This command is available up inside of the lab. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And in just a moment, we'll start getting some scan results. Now this might take a little while, so do be patient. I should point out that we're going to have to run two WordPress scans. One with the U switch, which is looking for users, and then we'll have to do another AP switch, which is looking for the plugins. So right now we're doing the one for the users, and as soon as it completes, we'll take a look at what we got from that, and then we'll move on with scanning for the vulnerable plugins. So our WordPress scan, looking for users, came up with a nice list of 10, and we're going to keep this in mind. We're going to come back to this, and we're going to take a look at one of the users who is probably going to be the administrator because he's listed as number 1 there, and that would be John. But we also see that Ellie's in here, Barry's in here, and we got some other users that we know about, such as Kathy and Tim. So we're going to run the scan one more time looking for those vulnerable plugins, and this time I'm going to remove the U and I'm going to replace that with the AP switch. And we're going to go ahead and run this and see what comes up. And again, you got to be patient, and in just a moment we'll have our information that we need. See if we can exploit any of these vulnerable plugins that might be present. So as the WordPress scan starts to look for vulnerable plugins, it's first going to do a passive scan. If it doesn't find anything there, it's going to move on to the intense scan. And you can see this is what's going on down at the bottom of my terminal. Our scan has turned up 4 plugins, and we see that the one that we're going to be taking a look at for a possible exploitation is going to be the advanced-video-embed-videos-videos-or-playlist. Now, if we do some research on this, we find out that it is vulnerable. So we're going to use another tool up inside of my Cali called Search Exploit to see if we can find an exploit that we can run against this WordPress site. And let's see what happens when we do this. So I've opened up a new browser, I've typed in Search Exploit, and I've typed in what I'm looking for, which is the advanced video exploit. Now, interestingly enough, this is going to turn out to be a Python script, and we're going to have to build it, which is not that difficult. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our storage folder, in this case stapler, and we're going to create a text file, and we're going to name that text file 39646.py. And let's go ahead and get started with that. So I'm back over inside of my storage directory, Stabler, and now I'm going to go ahead and open up Nano, which is my text editor, and I'm going to create a file called 39646.py. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and that's going to give me a blank file to work with. Now we're going to open up a browser, and we're going to go get the syntax or the code that we need to place inside of this file that we just created. Here's the address for the code that we're going to need to copy and place inside of my new Nano text file, and it's up here on the GitHub. And this is the path, which is also available up inside of the lab. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. In just a moment, we're going to get this code. So what I want is the raw data. So I'm going to move this on over to the raw, and I'm going to put my mouse inside there, and I'm going to do a Control A, and I'm going to do a Control C, copy this. I'm going to minimize my browser, come back on over here to my text editor, and I'm now going to right click, and I'm going to paste all this. So the part of this text or this Python code we have to change is for this URL right here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on over here, and we're going to put in the IP address of our WordPress server. I'm using Nano as my text editor, but you're free to use any text editor you want. I'm now going to do a Control X, and I'm now going to type in Y for yes, and the file has been saved over to my stapler location. So that's going to conclude part 1 for the stapler walkthrough. Now in part 2 we'll pick up right here where we left off, and I'll see you then. Greetings and welcome to part 2 of our video walkthrough for the Capture the Flag stapler. Using the IP address of the WordPress site that we injected into the script, this script is going to go to the WordPress site. It's going to generate a JPEG, which we'll later download, that will contain all the base settings for the WordPress site to include any Mysql account information. Before we get too far along, it's always a good idea to just double check your work. So let's do a cat and check the contents of this Python script to make sure that everything's correct. And what we want to look at is that URL and make sure that this is the actual IP address of the WordPress that is running on our target and that the path is correct. To run a Python script, we just type in Python followed by the script, and we're now ready to hit enter. And in just a moment it should come back with the information. And the terminal comes back to the prompt letting us know that the script ran successfully. Our next step is to visit the contents and the uploads directory for the WordPress site. To do this, we're going to open up a browser. Again, we'll need to add an exception. So we're going to go to Advanced, scroll on down, add the exception, and we're going to confirm the security exception, and now we're into the directory. Since this is my third validation of this particular Capture the Flag exercise, I'm going to have more than just one JPEG. So this is the JPEG that we just created up here, and now your number for the JPEG that you create is going to be different than any of these. But you will have a JPEG up here if the script had the right IP address for your WordPress site. To make life easier, we can just right click on the JPEG and we can copy the link location. You can go ahead and minimize your Firefox, and now we can just bring up a text editor, any text editor, and we can copy and we can paste that location of that particular JPEG into the text file. Using this information, we're going to go ahead and create a wget command that's going to pull down the JPEG and save it to our stapler location. So we see what the rest of this wget command looks like. It's just wget space dash dash no dash check dash certificate followed by the path to that JPEG. Inside the text editor, we place our cursor, we do a Control A, do a Control C, minimize your text editor, come on back to your terminal, right click, and then you paste. Once you confirm that everything is typed in correctly, go ahead and just hit enter, and you'll see that you get a positive result down here at the bottom where you see that the JPEG was copied over with 100% success rate. We're now ready to look at the contents of this JPEG, so let's go ahead and do an ls, see what the contents are up here, and we see that the JPEG is waiting for us right here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and what I'm going to do now is just cat it out to my terminal. Paste that in there, hit enter, and now we have the information that was gathered from our WordPress site for all the Mysql information that we need to be able to log on as an administrator. We have now been able to enumerate the root credentials for the Mysql. Now this is going to allow us to get some more information so we can move further along with trying to get into the WordPress site. We do have a password, and that is right here. So we're going to go ahead and use root as our user and this password to gain access to the Mysql database. We're now ready to access the Mysql database as root. To do this, I'm going to use the Mysql command space dash u switch space the name of the user I'm going to log on as, which is root, dash p, which is for the password, and then I'm going to use a dash h followed by the IP address of the WordPress site that is running the Mysql. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And now once that password for the Mysql database, so I've already copied it, I'm going to paste it, I'm going to hit enter, and it comes up letting me know that we have successfully logged on to the Mysql database. We need to dig around for some information about WordPress, so let's start off with showing databases. I've typed in show databases and I hit enter, and I have to remember to place that semicolon at the end. And there are our databases. We're concerned with that WordPress database, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up and see what it has to offer. So I've typed in u space WordPress semicolon. Hit enter. We're now inside of the WordPress database. Now we can get some more information. We're now inside of the WordPress database, so let's do a show tables and see what kind of information this database actually contains. We can now enumerate the WP_users table. So let's go ahead and expand that with a little bit more information. And to do this, we're going to type in describe space WP_users semicolon. I'm going to hit enter. And now if I make this full screen, and we get a nice formatted output, and it tells us some information that we're going to dig further into. So we want to start off with getting some user login information, and then we want to know about their password, and we're going to output that to our terminal as well. Let's see if this is going to work. For this next bit of information that I want to get from this particular database and this table, I've used a select command. So I've typed in select space user_login. I want to get this information from here. And I want to know if there's any user password information that can be associated with the WP_users. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And here we have the users along with their hashed passwords. Now the way things work in databases and with administrators, usually the first name in the list is going to be the administrator. So we can assume, hopefully, that John is going to be the administrator, and if we can crack his hash, we can get his password for the login to the WordPress site. So let's see how we're going to do this. We're going to start off by copying this information from this terminal, and we're going to place this into a text document. So I'm going to open up a second terminal, and in this second terminal I'm going to type in nano space hash.txt. I'm going to hit enter, and we see that John is formatted now with his hashed password. All right, so this is what it has to look like up inside of the text file for this to work. We're going to use John the Ripper with a word list that's going to crack this hash, and we'll get John's password. And let's see how that works. So once you've created that text file for John's username and his hash password, go ahead and do a Control X and get on out of there. If it asks you to save the information from the buffer, go ahead and say yes, and then just hit enter, and that'll close it out. So it just so happens that to launch John the Ripper, we can just type in John at the terminal, and then we're going to tell it that we want to use a word list and where this word list is located, and that we want it to run it against the text file we created called hash.txt. Here's a little bit of a caveat for you. If you have not used the rocku.txt word list before, you're going to have to go into the location and extract it from its archive. Use your File Explorer, open it up, scroll to the bottom and click on Other Locations, and we're going to go to Computer, and now we're going to go to the USR folder, and we're going to go into the Share, and then we're going to scroll on down to the word list. Inside the Share folder, you're going to go to Word List. From there, you're going to find the rocku.txt.gz archive, and then you can just extract that. Just right-click on it, say Extract here. When you're done, you'll have a rocku.txt file. With everything in place, we're now ready to go ahead and crack that hash for the username John. And this would work a lot better if I was inside of the directory for the location of the hash.txt file. So let's go ahead and change directory back on over to my stapler and run that command one more time. Alright, now we're into the right directory where the hash.txt file is actually located. So once you have run John the Ripper against this word list and the hash.txt file, you're going to come up with the password for the user John. The password for user John in this case is incorrect. With our username and password in hand, we're now ready to attempt to log in to the WordPress site as administrator. So we're going to go ahead and visit that real quick. Now if you get lost and you can't find the login page, just backtrack on over to the blog site and scroll on down till you come to the login option, and then that'll take you over to the WordPress login. Let's go ahead and add this another exception. Alright, so I'm going to scroll on down here, say add exception. There we go. And we're ready to log into the WordPress site, and we're going to use the user John, and the password is incorrect. And we're now logged on to the dashboard for the WordPress site. Though we did get administrative access to the WordPress console, it's not going to prove to be of much use. So we're going to move on with another exploit. To get us the shell access that we need, we're going to use the infamous PHP Reverse Shell script. We'll upload the script using our terminal, and this is going to give us enough functionality, just enough, to brute force our way into the root access that we need. This particular script that we need to get is called the PHP-Reverse Shell, and it's located up here in a little site called pentestmonkey.net. So this address, this URL, is located up inside the lab file, or you can try to copy it here. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to go visit that site, and we're going to download this particular script. Alright, so we're up here, and this is the PHP Reverse Shell. It's well known. I've already used it on a couple of other capture the flags, and it's very good. So we're going to go ahead and use it again here. So this is the file you're going to download. So go ahead and just start the download, and you're going to save the file, and then just a moment it's going to download. You can open up your download folder. Once you've opened your download location, go to the directory to which it was saved. Now you can right click on this, that is to say the download. It is a archive, and you want to move it. So you're going to move it on over to where? Your stapler folder. So select your stapler directory and then go on up and click on the select button. That will move the script on over to your stapler location. Once we have that done, we can close out our browser, close out all the tabs. We don't need those anymore. and return to our terminal. Find that Stabler directory that's located on your desktop. Go ahead and open it up. Once you're inside of your Stabler directory, go ahead and find the download you just moved. You're just going to right click on it and you're going to select Extract Here. That brings up the contents of that particular archive that we just extracted, and it's called Php Reverse Shell 1.0. Go ahead and open up that, and you're going to find a Php Reverse Shell.php file. Go ahead and copy this, close that out, or just backtrack on over to your stapler. And you're going to right click inside of the root of your stapler folder and you're going to paste. Okay, so here's the file that we just copied over from this directory, and we got it inside of the root of our stapler location. We're now going to right click on this and we're going to select Open with Other Applications, and you're going to select any of the different text editors that you like to use. I'm just going to use one. Doesn't make any difference which one I use. You're going to scroll down inside of this script until you find the location that says change this. There's two of them. One is the IP address, and this is going to be your Cali IP address, not the WordPress. So make sure that you put in the IP address for your Cali machine. And then you're going to change the port, or you can leave it. I like using port 4444, but you can leave this, or you can put in any port number you want as long as it's not being in use. So we're going to go ahead and change this over to my IP address for my Cali machine because it's going to be the listener. So where it says $IP address equals, I have typed in the IP address for my Cali machine. And then where it says $port equals, that is the listening port. And we'll explain more of that in just a moment. Once you've got all this done, go up here and click on the Save button. And now you can close that out, and you can return to your desktop. So the next thing we want to do is create a listener using Netcat. So I've typed in netcat space -v space -n space -l space -p with the port that I want Netcat to listen on. Now once you have this command typed in, just hit enter, and it's going to begin listening on port 4444 or whatever port you told it to listen on. So leave that listener running, and we're going to open up another terminal. I'm going to right click on the terminal icon, select new window, and this time we're going to configure a wget command to push that PHP file on up to the WordPress site. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in wget space --no-check -certificate. This will stop it from not allowing us to upload because we can't verify the certificate for this particular location. This is the path we need to use to upload the PHP script to the WordPress site. Alright, we've already been up there one time and we've seen this JPEG. Well, we're going to go back up there and we're going to see that there's a reverse shell waiting for us. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and it's working. And when it gets done, we'll go back up and we'll check for that upload script. So here's our PHP file that we just uploaded. It's now present. Now here's a little trick. If you close out this website or you reboot, you're going to lose that connectivity. So just come back in here, double click on this PHP file, and that'll start the whole process of it communicating with your Netcat one more time. So once the script has been uploaded, the listener, that is to say our Netcat listener, will pick up the communication between the WordPress site and this particular terminal. And you'll know when this happens because you're going to get this readout here letting you know that it has picked up the communication between this terminal and the script. Now this is our terminal. It's limited access, so we're going to have to do some more work to get us in here. But that's going to have to be continued in part 3 of this video walkthrough. So I'll see you in part 3. Welcome to part 3 of the video walkthrough for the Capture the Flag exercise stapler. When we last left off, we had just established that limited shell using the Php Reverse Shell script. And now we're going to go ahead and start pounding away trying to get some, I should say, privileged access using a couple of more exploits. Let's see how this is going to work out. So at my shell script, I've typed in who am I, and you'll see that we are logged on as www.data. Well, we need to be logged on as root to be able to have full root access. So let's go ahead and see how we're going to do that. From our earlier enumeration of this particular target, we found out that the machine was running Ubuntu 16.04. Well, we need to find out if there is an exploit that will allow us privilege escalation onto this machine so that we can get root access. Let's see how we go about doing that. Using searchploit, I typed in Ubuntu along with the version number, and then I followed that up with privilege escalation. Now, if you go down here, you're going to have to find the kernel that we're currently using. And for us, that's going to be 4.4.x, but also this has to be the 32-bit, which is the operating system that we currently have on our target. So we're going to look at this particular exploit right here, 39772.txt. I recommend going out to the internet and getting the latest version of this exploit. These get updated all the time. So just open up your browser. Now you can go to the GitHub site and you can go to their exploit database. And inside the database they have a search engine, and you can just type in what exploit it is that you want to find. Here's the download path, and this is also available up inside of the lab file. Now you can see it's pretty long. But again, just go to the GitHub site, or you can just type into Google the name of the exploit, and you'll bring up the search engine for the GitHub site, and then you can download it from there. Alright, so let's go ahead and see what we got here. So here's the download file itself. We're going to do the same thing as we did before with our previous download of that PHP script. We're going to go ahead and save it. We're going to open up the download directory. We're going to go to the download folder itself, and we're going to right click on it, and we're going to move to, we're going to go to our desktop, we're going to select stapler, and we're going to click on the select button. I've already downloaded it once, so I'm going to go ahead and just say replace it. Once you're done there, you can go on back to your desktop, close out your browser, and we can go ahead and clear this terminal, and we'll begin to get busy with this latest download, which will hopefully give us that root access that we need. So the first thing we want to do is just go ahead and do an ls, and let's see what's inside of our stapler directory. And we see that we have this particular download that we just moved on over there. So what we have to do now is extract it, and we're going to use the unzip command. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste the name of that directory in there, and I'm going to hit enter. Alright, so now you're not going to see this. What you're going to see is just the extraction of these particular files that are inside of this archive. Alright, so we're going to move on, and now what we're going to do is we're going to get inside of the folder that we extracted. So if we do another ls, you'll see that we have a folder in here called 3972. I should say 39772. So I'm going to go ahead and change directory on over into here. Right click and paste that in there, and now you'll see that my prompt has changed to let me know that I'm in that directory. So now what I'm going to do is another ls, and we're going to see what's actually inside of here. So we have a crasher.tar and we have an exploit.tar. So we're now ready to extract the contents of the exploit.tar. To do this, I've typed in the command tar space xvf space exploit.tar. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and this is the contents of this particular exploit.tar file. So we're going to list the contents of the 39772 directory one more time, and you'll see now that we have another directory inside of here called the ebpf underscore long name double put underscore exploit. We're going to change directory over to that location. Now, make it easy on yourself. Do a CD and just highlight and copy it. No need to try to fat finger that one. So we're going to do a copy, and I'm going to right click in here and paste, and I'm going to hit enter. Let's do an ls and see what's in this location. We have a compile.sh, doubleput.c, hello.c, and we have another file called the suid helper.c. This particular exploit requires some finesse, so make sure that you're following along with the instructions exactly as they're written. I'm going to back up one level. I'm going to go into the 39772 folder again. To do this, I just type in cd space ... Now I'm back to my 39772 directory. To move these exploits up to the web server that we want to gain root access to, we're going to have to create our own HTTP server inside of the 39772 directory. To do this, we're going to use a very small Python script that's going to build for us a very small HTTP server running on port 8000. Let's see how we do this. So there's the script itself. It's a Python script, very small, python space -m space followed by simple HTTP server. Watch your syntax, make sure you spell it correctly. Now, it has to run inside of the 39772 folder because that's where the exploits are located. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and now we are serving HTTP on the root of port 8000. So inside of this 39772 folder, I have started a very small HTTP server. So we go ahead and minimize this. Let's get back on over to our shell. Now, from our shell, we're going to use the wget command, and we're going to type in wget, the path, and the port along with the exploit that we want to upload. Let's see how we do this. So here's the wget command that I used. Now let's explain this. I did an wget space followed by the IP address of my Cali machine, not the WordPress machine, because I'm saying to this shell, I want you to go to the web server located at .28, and I want you to upload the exploit.tar. So let's go ahead and hit enter. And so we get a denied permission. That's because we're not in the right folder. So if you look at it and you do an ls, you've got to go in here and you've got to find a folder to which you have permissions to. This gets a little tricky because a lot of these folders aren't going to let us do anything. But there's a good chance that if we go inside of the temp folder, we can. So what I want to do here now is I want to do a cd over to the temp folder. So I'm going to attempt to get into the temp folder by doing a cd tmp, and you'll notice that I did. So I'm now inside of the temp folder. Alright, so now we can run that wget command one more time, and hopefully this time it's going to work. And we get an OK. So we were able to just change directories into a folder to which we had permissions, and we were able to upload the exploit.tar using the wget command. So let's go ahead and do an ls, see what's inside of this temp folder, and we see we have the exploit.tar. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to expand this one more time. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste this in there. So again, it's tar space xvf space exploit.tar. Go ahead and hit enter, and it'll let you know that those files have been extracted. So we're going to change directory over into this folder here. So I've typed in cd, and I've typed in, or I've copied and pasted in the path, and we're now inside of that folder. So we can do another ls, and we have the compiler.sh waiting for us, doubleput.c, hello.c, and the suid helper.c. All good stuff. Alright, now we're going to change permissions on the compiler so that we can run it as an executable. We're almost done here. So we're going to do the change mod space +x. Now this is going to compile the .sh as an executable, and that's done. Now we're going to run the compiler.sh as a script. Let's see how we do that real quick. So I've typed in period /compile.sh. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And in just a moment it's going to come up and it's going to give me some information about what's going to happen here within the next 60 seconds. So that's been done. Now we need to do another ls, and this time we're going to run another script called the double put. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that on over here. So this script is going to be also ran. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on that one. And from here it's going to start to write, and it's going to get us the root access that we need. So you do everything as it's outlined inside of this part 3, and you do it correctly. And it, like I said, it does require a little bit of finesse because you've got to follow this exactly as it is instructed. So it's telling you that you're going to have root access in about 60 seconds. Alright, so we have root access now. I can go ahead and hit enter. So we've given it long enough, at least 60 seconds. So I've typed in cd space /root, see if we can get into the root folder. So I guess I'm into the root folder now, so let's do an ls. And we have a number of files in here, and the one I'm interested in is the one that's called the flag.txt. I'm going to cut out the flag.txt and see what we show here. And we have now achieved root access. So there are some things in here that you've got to be aware of, such as waiting the 60 seconds, doing the right commands at all time, and being attentive to this last part of the walkthrough. It's very particular. If you skip any of those steps, you don't do the HTTP server, you don't do the extraction correctly, then you're going to have grief. So make sure you follow the directions exactly as they are shown in this video and in the lab. That concludes this 3-part video walkthrough for the Capture the Flag exercise called Stapler. Now, if you have any questions or concerns about anything that was covered in this video, please do not hesitate to reach out and contact your instructor, and I'll see you in the next Capture the Flag exercise. Greetings and welcome to the step-by-step walkthrough for the Capture the Flag exercise known as Mr. Robot. In this lab you will attempt to capture 3 hidden flags using the hacking methodology. This CTF exercise has 3 hidden keys in different locations. Your goal is to find all 3. Each key becomes progressively more difficult to find. The level of expertise for this CTF is considered somewhere between beginner to intermediate. There isn't any advanced exploitation or any reverse engineering. The lab requirements for this particular CTF are 1 virtual install of Cali Linux and 1 virtual install of the VM Mr. Robot. The CTF uses a custom VM OVA file that can be imported as an appliance in either Virtualbox or Vmware. The Mr. Robot OVA file is approximately 704 megabytes and it downloads very quickly. The site is well maintained and the links for the downloads are in the lab file. For this demonstration I'll be using Vmware Workstation, and I have both my Cali and Mr. Robot VMs up and running inside of the terminal. Now, if you click on the Cali Linux and you look at the settings for your network adapter, make sure that you use the same settings for your Mr. Robot virtual machine. So they both got to match up. If you don't do that, you're not going to have connectivity and you will experience epic failure. The first thing we have to do is to discover what network IP addressing we are using for this particular scenario. So we got to treat this CTF as if we've never been on the network before. To discover our network range, we're going to use the utility netdiscover. Just go ahead and type in netdiscover and hit enter. Give it a few minutes and it's going to come up and it's going to run through all the different possibilities for networking, IP addressing, and then it's going to give you the results. My network discovery has completed and I'm looking at 192.168.145.134 as my target. That's the machine where Mr. Robot is currently installed upon. Alright, so that's going to be our target. So make sure that you understand that this is my target, not your target. You have to discover your own IP address. Now that we have discovered our potential target, we need to go ahead and do an Nmap scan so that we can determine what ports and what services are currently running on the target. These are going to be looked at as possible areas that we might want to exploit. So I've typed in the Nmap and I've typed in the long command. Now this is available up inside the lab, and yes, there are different Nmap switches you could have used. Go ahead and hit enter, and we'll wait for the scan to complete. Our Nmap scan has completed, and we look at the results here in my terminal, and we see that SSH is closed using port 22, so that's not going to be of any use to us. But port 80 is running, and it's running in an Apache HTTPD server, so we know that this is actually a web server, and it's running the Linux kernel. So we know enough about this machine now that we can proceed on with doing some more discovery. To find out what vulnerabilities and what possible venues that we can attack up on side of this Apache web server, we're going to use the nicto -a command along with the IP address to scan that machine for any vulnerabilities. So I've gone ahead and typed in the command. I'm going to hit enter, and in just a few moments we'll get back the results of what vulnerabilities are currently present. Well, we found a number of interesting vulnerabilities and some interesting facts about this particular machine. First off, it is running WordPress, and so we're going to have some fun with that. But right now we're looking at some of the vulnerabilities we discovered, and we're going to start off with the server leaks. So we see that the server is leaking inodes via the E tags in the header of the robots.txt. This relates to the CVE-2003-1418 vulnerability. These entity tags are an HTTP header which is used for the web cache validation and conditional requests from browsers for resources. The Apache mod negotiation is enabled with multi-views, which will allow us to use a brute force attack in order to discover existing files on the server which use mod negotiation. We have a number of alternatives for the index, such as the index.html and the index.php file, and these can be used to provide us with more information about what's on the website. We have some WordPress pages that are going to be of interest to us, such as the WP links, WP-login, and the WP-admin. We also have a license.txt file that may provide some identity to what type of software is actually running on the site. This can help us get some version information sometimes, not all the time, but it might help us with identifying what version of WordPress is actually running. That concludes our initial footprint of the Mr. Robot web server, and we got some really good information, so we can go ahead and get started by accessing as much as we can of the Mr. Robot site. Now, the only way we're going to be able to access the Mr. Robot site or the VM is using a web browser. So go ahead and open up Cali, and what you're going to do is you're just going to type in the IP address of your web server, or in this case the target, Mr. Robot. So remember that this is my IP address for my target, not yours. Your IP address will differ. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And this is a pretty interesting website. This is well coded. You'll see that as it starts up, it becomes interactive. Now, this is all from the show, Mr. Robot, and I'm not familiar with the show, so if you are, then you have actually seen this before. Now, you have some commands that you can actually type in to this website. For instance, if you want to join, you can just type in join, and it comes up with some more script asking you to go ahead and input your email address, which of course we won't do. You won't find much useful out of this particular web page, but you're free to go ahead and explore, type in the commands, and see what other type of interactivity you can get into. From our previous web vulnerability scan, we looked and we found that we had some inodes that were leaking via the E tags on the robot.txt file. So that should be our next stop. So I'm going to go ahead and place that into my web browser up here, and we're going to go ahead and get on over there and take a look at that. And here is your first key. So the robot.txt has a couple of files that are of interest. First is the fsociety.dict, which is dictionary, and we have our first key, which is key 1 of 3. The next thing we have to do is go ahead and make a folder on our desktop, and we're going to start moving some of these files that we need or that we have discovered over to that folder for use later on in this particular lab. So we're going to be saving the fsociety.dictionary file along with the key-1 of 3.txt. Let's go ahead and minimize our browser, and we're going to close this one out. Now I'm going to open up a terminal, and we're going to go ahead and clear this. Let's begin by going ahead and changing the location over to our desktop using the cd command. Once you have that typed in, go ahead and hit enter. Notice that your prompt changes to let you know that you are now inside of the desktop directory. The next thing we need to do is create a directory on the desktop. And now you're free to call this anything you want. I'm calling this directory Mr. Robot. So I'm going to use the mkdir command to create the directory. And I'm already on the desktop, so that's where it's going to be saved. If I hit enter, you'll notice that the directory, the new directory, pops up onto my desktop. So we're going to use the wget command to pull this fsociety.dictionary file off of the target and bring it on over here to my desktop. So I've typed in wget space the actual path to my target and what file or what directory I want to capture. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and you'll see that it did capture it, and here it is right here. And I'm now going to just push this on up into the folder that I want it to be in, just like that. We're now ready to copy over the key-1 of 3.txt file off of the target machine and bring it on over here to my new directory that's sitting on my desktop. So I've gone ahead and typed in the command. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and now it appears on my desktop, and I'm just going to push that up inside of the Mr. Robot folder. Now you can open up your Mr. Robot folder, and you can open up either one of these. The fsociety.dictionary is just a very long Word file. Contains a lot of different words, a lot of duplicates, and we're going to work on trying to fix that in just a moment. Now the key that we have to have is inside of this key-1 of -3.txt file. If you open it up, you'll see that there's your key. Now this is just a hash, and it doesn't mean anything. You can go out and you can try to break this hash, but it doesn't resolve into anything. So it's just a key that is used to represent the first flag. So our dictionary file is way too big, and it contains a lot of duplicates. And so what we're going to do is we're going to shorten this down from the 850,000 words to approximately 11,000. So let's change directory on over to the Mr. Robot folder. Notice that my prompt changes to let me know that's where I'm at now. You can do an ls to check the contents of what's inside of the folder, and we see we have our two files that we downloaded. We can look at the word count inside of the fsociety.dictionary file just by typing in wc space -L followed by the name of the file. In just a moment, it comes back and it tells us that it contains 858,160 words. So we're now going to make this file much smaller by using the following command. We're going to say cat space fsociety.dictionary or .dic space pipe space sort space -u, which stands for unique. We want to sort all the words inside of this dictionary, make them unique, and then we're going to look at what the new count is by using the wc space -L command. So let's see what happens. So it comes back up, and we've gotten it down from over 800,000 words to just 11,451 unique words. So the next thing we want to do is just go ahead and save this smaller file using a new name. So I've typed in basically the same command, and this time I want it saved as a unique file, and I want to call it something different, so I'm going to call it new fsociety.dic, and I'm going to hit enter, and it comes back to the prompt letting me know that the command completed successfully. Now if I do an ls, you'll see that I have 3 files inside of my Mr. Robot folder. So now we have key 1 in the bag, and we're ready to move on to the next part of the CTF, which is looking for keys number 2 and key number 3. Well, that was our first key for this particular CTF, And going forward, we're going to find that the next two keys aren't going to be as easy. To recap, we were able to do a vulnerability scan using the Netcat vulnerability scanner, and we came up with some interesting information about this robot.txt file. And that's what led us in this direction. That concludes part 1 of this series on the CTF Mr. Robot. Now there's going to be 2 more short videos, and each one of those is going to be broken down for the remaining 2 keys. See you in part 2. Greetings and welcome to our second walkthrough video on how we go about acquiring the second key for this Mr. Robot capture the flag exercise. We're going to continue on with our discovery by looking at some more of the different pages that are available up on the Mr. Robot site. You'll recall from our Netcat vulnerability scan that we found a number of different web pages up on the WordPress site for Mr. Robot. We're now going to examine these different web pages to see if they offer us anything of usefulness. So I'm going to bring up my browser here, and for brevity's sake, I've gone ahead and loaded up all the different pages. We're going to start off with the home page, which we already know about. Now, I know that we talked about viewing the source, and this is something that's often overlooked by even professionals, but you can right-click on the page and you can view the page source, and this gives you the code. And oftentimes developers will leave little hints of something up inside of the page code, but in this case we're not getting any help, so we can go ahead and close that one out. Now over here is the index.html, and all this does is just keep trying to reload, so we can close that out. That's no use to us either. And then we have the PHP. Now this was the index.php page, and all this does is redirect you back to the main page. So that's not going to be much help to us either. You can go ahead and close that one out. Now normally the license.txt file would give you some information about the version number of WordPress and some other things, but we're not getting anything from this. So we can go ahead and close that one out. That brings us up to the wp-login.php page. Now we can sit here using the fsociety.dictionary file that we created, and we can start typing in usernames that we find in the list of words, but it's going to take us a long time. That's what we call the long way home, and what we're going to do is use some of the tools that we have available to us up inside of Cali, and we're going to go ahead and figure out what the username is, because once we get the username, we can then find out what the password is. So that Burp can actually intercept what we're doing over here on this WordPress login page, we've got to set up a proxy that directs all of the input back over to the Burp suite. And the way we do this, we go on over here to the menu and we click on Preferences. Under Preferences, we click on the Advanced option, and then we're going to click on Network, and then we're going to click on Settings. Underneath Settings, we're going to select the radio button for Manual Proxy Configuration. And where it says HTTP proxy, we're going to type in the loopback address, which is 127.0.0.1, and we're going to be using port 8080. Go ahead and say OK to that. Now, go ahead and leave everything open as it is, and just minimize your browser. Now you can open up the Burp suite. And in just a moment, this is going to start up, and we're going to see how we go about using it. So we're not going to update. We can close that out. This is going to be a temporary project. Say Next. And we're going to use the Burp defaults. We're going to start Burp. Burp is going to start up in just a moment. Now, once Burp starts up, we're going to select the Proxy tab. Underneath the Proxy tab, we want to make sure that Intercept is on. We're now going to bring up our browser one more time. And this time we're going to go back on over to this Word page logon, and we're just going to type in any username, and we're going to type in any password, and we're going to say login. Now, this should have all been captured by the Burp suite, so we're going to minimize this. We're going to check it out. And here it is right here. So we see that we have all the information we need for the logon fields. Now, or I should say the fields that were present on the logon page. So the user is being referenced as log, and the password is being referenced as &WP. So we're now able to tell Hydra, which is going to be our next tool, what fields to fill in with the brute force that it's going to use using the F-Society dictionary file that we created. And using the word list that we created, it should be able to figure out a username. Now that we have the information we need for Hydra, we can go back over to our browser and we can remove that proxy. So I'm going to go back on over to the menu. I'm going to open up Preferences. I'm going to go to the Advanced option, Network, Settings, and I'm going to go back up and select the radio button that says No Proxy. I'm going to say OK to that, and now we can minimize this one more time. We need to be working with Hydra inside of our Mr. Robot folder, because this is where the F-Society or the new F-Society.dictionary file is actually located. So Hydra is going to be looking inside of this Mr. Robot folder, and if it's not there, then it's just going to error out. So let's go ahead and see how we format this command for Hydra to be able to use it to brute force the username for the WP logon site using the new F-Society.dictionary file. So now that I have the information about the form fields that I need to input into this Hydra command, I can close out the burp suite. I've opened up a terminal, and now I have configured this long command syntax to use Hydra to figure out what the username is for the logon for that WordPress site. So I've typed in Hydra space -L, which is list, and I'm telling it to use the new F-Society.dictionary file. And I give it a space -P, which is for the password. Now we can type in anything for the password because we don't care. So in this case, we're just using who cares. Give it a space, give it the IP address of the page, and then we come on down and we say that look inside of the HTTP-form post, and we're telling it to look for certain things such as the log field, which is the user, and the password, which is represented as $.pwd. That equals password. Now it needs to know this because that's the code that's inside the page, and we don't see that. We see username and we see password, but the code that is used to represent this to the machine is something different. That's why Hydra has to know it. We're going to go ahead and just hit enter here. Now this is going to take a while. Now imagine how long it would take if we used the 860,000 word dictionary file that we were given originally. We knocked that down to 11,000 words, and that's going to take still about 5 or 10 minutes. So be patient with this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to start working. Make sure you're running this Hydra program inside of the Mr. Robot directory so that it knows where to find this new F-Society.dictionary file. Again, we're not interested in finding the password. We're only interested in finding a legitimate user account that will allow us to find the password using another utility. Hydra has given me a username by the name of Elliot. So Elliot is going to be the username we're going to use to get us to the next step here. So we're going to use Elliot with the WP Scan utility to figure out what the password is for this particular account. We're still inside the Mr. Robot directory, and this is where we need to be because this is where the word list that WP Scan needs to see if it can find a password for the Elliot account. So we've typed in WP Scan space --URL, and that's the URL of our target, space --word list, and that word list is located at /root/desktop up inside the Mr. Robot directory, and the file name is new F-Society.dic or dictionary space --, and the username is Elliot. Now we're telling this WP Scan that, hey, we have a username, but see if you can brute force and find us the password for this particular user. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and in just a moment it should come back and give us some information. After about 4 minutes, the WP scan comes back and it gives us the password for the username Elliot. Turns out that Elliot is the main character for the Mr. Robot TV show, and his password turns out to be his badge number, ER28-0652. Let's go ahead and minimize our terminal, and let's bring up our browser, and let's get onto that logon page. Alright, so we're going to type in Elliot and his password. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and that gets us to the main dashboard of the WordPress site. We start with the plugins, and we start going down and we start investigating the plugins to see which ones might be vulnerable. In this case, we didn't have any luck. None of these are actually vulnerable, and the ones that were vulnerable have been updated to a newer version, making them more secure. So whatever vulnerability did exist in the past is no longer valid. Since we have gained access to this WordPress site and we have access to the plugins, what comes to mind is uploading a PHP package or plugin that's going to give us a reverse shell. Now this is pretty easy to do, but you got to follow the steps exactly as they're shown to you here. First thing you want to do is go on out to the internet, and you want to go to Pentest Monkey, and here we can get a PHP-reverse shell. You're going to download this package and save it to your Mr. Robot folder. Okay, we get that done, and then we're going to do some extraction, and we're going to do a couple of other things to get this package ready to upload as a plugin to this WordPress site. So go ahead and download. We're going to start the download here in just a second, and we're going to go ahead and do a save the file. This is going to save it to the default download folder. Once this is downloaded, we can go ahead and open up the folder where it is contained, and now we see that it's here, and we can go ahead and move it. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to say move to, and I want to move it on over to my desktop to the Mr. Robot, and I'm going to go ahead and just select and move it on in there. Close this out, minimize my browser, and let's go on over to Mr. Robot. So once we have the file moved on over to our Mr. Robot folder, we can go ahead and right click on the download, and we can say extract here. That creates another folder, and inside that folder we have another folder, and inside here we have the PHP Reverse Shell.php file that we need to edit. Now to edit this, I'm just going to right click, and I'm going to say open with other applications. So I'm going to select LeafPad because I like using it. Now this is what you're going to have to input into this file for this to work. This is part of it. There's actually two areas that we have to modify. This is the first part. We have to add the WordPress header information. So you can go out, I'll take you to the site, and this information is also available inside of the lab file. But you can also go out to the internet, and you can go over here to this basedpin.com, and you can get the information for that header. But as I said, the URL and the actual information is posted inside of the lab file. Alright, so we can minimize this. We come back on over here to our file, and once we've actually done this, where we've gone in and we've added the header information, we have one more thing to edit, and we have to go down here, and we have to change this IP address to the IP address of your Cali machine, because it is the listener. So this is the listener that you're going to have to change or configure for this reverse shell to work. We're telling the reverse shell that, hey, listen, when this launches, you're going to go back on over and you're going to find this address here, this machine, and you're going to be looking for port 4444, and you're going to create the shell that we so badly need. So we've got all that information inside here, so we're going to go ahead and close that out. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to create an archive, a zip archive. So we right click on the file. Let's do that again. We right click on the file and we just select compress, and from here we select a zip as our archive type, and we say create, and there's our archive. So now we're ready to go with that. But before we upload this to the WordPress site, we've got to create our listener. So we're going to bring up a terminal, And on this terminal, we're going to type in NC space dash small letter V space dash small letter N space dash small letter L space dash small letter P space, and we're going to give it the port that we're listing on, which is 4444. All right, we can go ahead and minimize that. Now don't close it out, just minimize it. All right, now we can go back on over to our WordPress site and begin uploading our Reverse Shell plugin. So I've gone back over to my WordPress site. I'm on the plugins page. I'm going to click on Add New. That's going to take us over to the option to upload a plugin. We're going to click on that, and now we're going to browse on over to that zip file we created. And now we're going to select the Install button, and in just a moment we should get the option to go ahead and activate this plugin that we just uploaded. So I'm going to go ahead and say Activate, and that's going to generate an error message that we can ignore. So we're going to go ahead and ignore that. And now if everything's working, we should be able to minimize this, open up our Reverse Shell listener, and there is our shell. So now we have a shell access to this WordPress site, and we can start looking for that second key. Now we can check to see who we're logged on as by typing in who am I, and it says I'm logged on as Damien. We can also do a host name. That gives us the operating system. And we can do a CD home, which we're going to do now. And we're now inside of the home directory. Now what we can do here is we can do an ls to list the contents. And you'll see that the only folder that's inside of this home directory is another folder called Mr. Robot. So let's go ahead and change directory on over there. Go ahead and enter. Now I'm inside of that directory. Now I can do an ls. And we see that we have our second key. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and try to cat this out so that we can see the contents of this particular file. But when we try to do a cat to see what the contents are of this particular file, we get a permission denied. So we have a password file, and I'm guessing is that that's where we're going to get the password that we need to get into the account that's going to give us access to this particular key file. So I've gone ahead and I've typed in cat space password, the name of the file, and this is for that password that we need to get access into the key. And it says that it comes back and it tells me that the password for the Mr. Robot account is this big long hash here. So we're going to copy this like so, and we're going to go out to the internet. We're going to find a MD5 decryptor that's going to give us this password. So I've gone out here to this decryptor site. This is called md5online.org. I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste that big long hash in here, and we're going to tell it to go ahead and decrypt and see how long it takes. Shouldn't take too long. And in just a moment it comes back with this alphabet. That is the password. It is the entire alphabet. That's the password that we need. So we need to go ahead and copy that because that's just too much to be typing in every time we need to use it. So now that we have the password, and it looks like it's for our username robot, we can go ahead and try to switch on over to this user. And it said it must be run from the terminal. So now we got another problem. So now we're going to have to create a terminal session. So let's see how we go about doing that. We can use the following Python script to go ahead and create a terminal. So I've already typed it into the prompt, but it's also available up inside of the lab file, and you can just copy and paste this if you so desire. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and now we've created that wonderful terminal that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and type in that SU robot and try to get over to that user account. And then it wants that long password that we decrypted. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it in here. Hit enter, and now we're at the root account, and we now have terminal access. Very cool. So we're now ready to go ahead and cat or bring to the terminal the contents of that text file for the second key. Now we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and now we get the contents. That's our second key. So we've got one key left to go. So I will see you in my next short video on how we go about acquiring that third and final key. Greetings and welcome to part 3 of the video walkthrough for the Mr. Robot CTF. So in our last video walkthrough in part 2, you saw how we went about capturing the key 2 of 3, and we now have one more key to go. So now we have key 2 of 3, we need to go ahead and get on with the business of finding key 3 of 3. And we're going to start off by getting into the root directory of the robot account. We're going to do this by typing in cd space /. That puts us into the very root of the robot account. Now we can type in ls, and we can now see the contents of what is available to us up inside of the root directory or the home directory of the robot account. Now there's not much of interest inside of this home directory of the robot account except for the root. That's the only thing we should be interested in. Everything else looks pretty normal. If we try to get into the root directory by typing in cd root, let's see what happens. It says that permissions are denied. So even though we're logged on as the robot account or the robot user, we don't have root permission. So let's go ahead and see what's going on here with the permission. So we're going to type in ls space -ALH, all lowercase. And that's going to give us the permissions for everything that's listed inside of this home directory for the robot account. Inside of this home directory for the robot user, we can do a find, or we can use the find command to look and see if there is actually a text file available based on what we know about the formatting of the name of the previous 2 keys. So we can do a search or a find for a text file using the name key-3-of-3.txt and see if that exists. And it says permission is denied, so we don't even have permissions to look inside of the home directory. So you see everything inside of here on this home directory is being kicked back for permissions being denied. What we have to do at this point is get an account with root access and with the octal permissions of 4000. So let's see how we go about doing that. So again, using the find command, I'm looking for a program or something that has the permissions set to 4000 or root access, I should say, that's going to allow me to get in and run as the root. So let's see if there's anything available. So we're looking through everything. We're looking for a program that has a root access that's going to allow us to run interactively with that program and give us the root permissions that we need to be able to access that root folder. So let's see if we find anything in here. Now the only thing of interest that we see is this Nmap. Now Nmap in the past has had the option that allowed the user to run interactively with it. And we're now going to check to see if we can use Nmap to gain access to the root folder with the root permissions. We know that Nmap has to have root access, root permissions to be able to run on the system. So if we do an Nmap space -help, we can also see if this version will allow us to operate interactively with Nmap while it runs at the root level. Let's take a look at this. And we see we have this option down here. So the older versions of Nmap did allow the user to operate interactively with Nmap while it was running. So we see that the switch to use with the Nmap command is the --interactive. And if I type this in at the prompt and I hit enter, it comes back up and it says welcome to interactive mode. Now you can type in H and you can get some information about what's going on with the interactive mode running with Nmap. What we're interested in is having a shell with root permissions. Now to get this, all I have to type in is the exclamation mark plus SH, and I should get a shell, and then we can do a who am I, and we can see what kind of access we have. And I am root. So now we should be able to get access to that root folder that belongs to that Mr. Robot account. So the next thing I want to do is just change directories on over to the root directory where we were previously denied. And now we are given that wonderful access. Pretty cool. Now the next thing we got to do is see if our key is actually listed or part of this root directory. And I see that it is. We have a couple of items in here, but one of the keys that we're missing, key number 3 of 3, is present. So we now have key 3 of 3. To see what that hash is that belongs to key 3 of 3, again, we're just going to cat the contents of this text file to our terminal, and we are given the hash for key 3. Again, we can now save the contents of this key to our Mr. Robot folder, and we have completed our first CTF. So this is going to conclude the exercise for our first capture the flag, the Mr. Robot CTF. And all I can say is wow, because doing this CTF exercise is just a great way to hone your skills. And regardless of the outcome, you will leave as a better pen tester or a hacker. Now my research showed that there were more than one way to execute a lot of these exploitations that we use. We didn't have to use the Python. We didn't have to use a lot of these different tools. We could have used Metasploitable, but because of the different in the versions that were used in the walkthroughs and what we have actually installed onto the Cali operating system, a lot of the different ways that were used didn't work. And so I went back and I found the surefire ways that would always work, and that was using the Python script and the burp suite and the other tools that we used to accomplish this capture the flag moment. That concludes this 3-part video presentation on how we go about completing the CTF for Mr. Robot. Now if you have any questions or you have any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact your instructor, and I'll see you in our next CTF.